Somewhere along the way, people began to believe that peace comes from controlling everything. It does not. The Buddhist stories lasting for centuries are about people learning this the hard way. Farmers watching the sky, parents fearing the future, lovers waiting for answers, and people holding tightly to things life was already changing. People exactly like the one listening now. Buddhism teaches that suffering grows when the mind demands control over what cannot obey it. But letting go is not weakness. It is the moment we stop fighting reality and begin meeting life with wisdom. 25 stories are ahead, 25 struggles, 25 moments of release. These are stories about loosening our grip, opening the heart, and finding peace where control ends. We begin with a farmer who believed the sky had forgotten him. Wherever you are right now, this is for you. The man in this story was not lazy. He worked before sunrise. He repaired his fences, cleared the weeds, carried water, sharpened his tools, and planted every seed with care. He did everything a farmer was supposed to do. Then he looked up and waited. The rain did not come. At first, he was patient. He told himself the clouds would gather tomorrow. Then tomorrow came with the same empty sky. The sun rose hard and white. The earth began to crack. The leaves curled at the edges. Each morning, the farmer walked into his field and pressed his fingers into the soil. It was dry deeper than he expected. Something inside him tightened. He began spending more time watching the sky than tending the ground. He studied every cloud. He argued with the wind. He said, "I planted at the right time. I worked harder than anyone. I did everything correctly. Why will you not give me what I need?" The sky gave no answer. We recognize this. Most of us have stood beneath a silent sky of our own. We have done what seemed right. And still, the answer did not come. We looked at life and said, "I have done my part. Now you must do yours." But life does not always obey fairness as we understand it. This is where suffering begins to deepen, not only in the pain of what is happening, but in the demand that it must not be happening. The farmer did not only suffer because the rain was absent, he suffered because he believed the rain should be under his command. Each day he carried the same argument into the field. Each day reality refused to argue back. The drought had entered his mind before it destroyed his crops. One afternoon, an old monk came walking along the road beside the farm. The farmer saw him and said, "Do not ask me for food. The sky has taken everything." "I was not going to ask for food," he said. "I was going to ask why you are fighting the sky." The farmer laughed without humor. "Because the sky is killing my field." The monk shook his head. "The drought is harming your field. Your fight with the drought is harming you." "Should I smile while my crops die?" "No," the monk said. "You should see clearly what is dying and what is not." He touched one leaf gently. "This plant needs rain," he said, "but it does not spend its last strength hating the sun." "It is a plant," the farmer replied. "Yes," said the monk, "and because it does not argue with what is, it uses all its strength to remain alive." "You have confused letting go with doing nothing." The farmer looked back at him. The monk drew a line in the dry soil with his staff. "On this side are the things you can guide, the seeds you choose, the soil you prepare, the water you save, the people you ask for help, the way you speak to your family, the work you do today." Then he drew another line. "On this side are the things that do not belong to you, the rain, the wind, the season, the choices of other people, the turning of time, the result of every effort." The farmer stared at the two sides. The monk said, "Wisdom is knowing where to place your hands. It is one of the hardest lessons a human being can learn. We place our hands on what cannot be held." The farmer had spent weeks trying to place his hands around the sky. Now, for the first time, he looked down at what was still within reach. There was a shallow well near the edge of his land. There were clay jars that could collect morning dew. There were stronger crops he could plant if the first ones failed. There were neighbors who had built a shared water channel from the river, but he had refused to join them because he wanted to prove he could manage alone. There was work left to do. Not the work of commanding rain, the work of responding wisely to its absence. The next morning the farmer went to his neighbors. His pride walked beside him. It told him to turn back. It told him they would laugh. He kept walking. He asked to join the water channel. No one laughed. They handed him a shovel. For many days he dug beside them. The sun remained hot. The sky remained empty. But something inside him began to cool. He came home tired instead of tormented. He apologized to his wife. He listened to his children. He ate slowly. He still looked at the sky, but he no longer treated it like an enemy. The drought had not ended. His suffering had changed. This is what Buddhist teaching means when it speaks about attachment. Attachment is not simply loving something. It is demanding that something remain, arrive, change, or obey so that we can be at peace. We say, I will be calm when this person understands me. I will forgive when I receive an apology. But peace built on obedience is fragile. The world has never promised to follow our plans. Everything that arises depends on conditions. Rain comes when conditions gather. Crops grow when conditions support them. People change when conditions within them change. We can influence some conditions. We cannot own them all. This is not hopelessness, it is freedom. He worked more wisely than before. He protected the weakest plants. He planted a smaller field. He stored water. He accepted help. And because he was no longer wasting his strength fighting the sky, he had strength for what could still be done. Then, one evening, clouds appeared in the distance. The farmer saw them. His old mind rose quickly. It said, "They must come here." He felt the familiar tightening in his chest. He almost began bargaining with the sky again. Then he remembered the 2 lines in the soil. He took a breath. "The clouds will go where conditions carry them," he said. The rain passed north of the farm. He watched it fall on distant hills. He felt disappointment. He did not pretend otherwise. Letting go does not mean becoming empty of feeling. It means allowing disappointment without turning it into war. The farmer stood quietly until the clouds disappeared. The old monk, who had returned along the road, saw him. "You did not shout," the monk said. "I wanted to." "And what happened?" "The clouds still passed." The monk smiled. "And you remained." Something inside the farmer understood. The rain could leave. The season could change. The harvest could fail. But he did not have to abandon himself each time life refused his command. The monk turned toward a nearby village. The farmer asked where he was going. "To see a woman who has been waiting many years for one sentence," the monk replied. "What sentence?" "I am sorry." The farmer looked once more at his field, then at the road. He knew something about waiting for life to obey, so he followed the monk toward the village, where another person was fighting a different kind of storm. The farmer followed the monk into the village. He had learned that the sky could not be forced. Now he was about to meet someone trying to force a human heart. The woman lived in a small house near the village well. She was known for helping others. She gave food to neighbors. She cared for sick children. She spoke gently to strangers. But when anyone mentioned her sister, her face changed. Something hard entered her eyes. For many years, the woman had been waiting for one sentence. "I was wrong." That was all she wanted. At least that was what she told herself. Her sister had accused her of taking money from their father before he died. The accusation spread through the family. Some believed it. some did not. The woman denied it again and again, but her sister never took the words back. Years passed. Their father died. The family separated. Children grew older. People moved away. Still, the woman waited. She believed peace would come when her sister finally returned and admitted the truth. The monk knocked on her door. The farmer stood behind him. The woman opened it and looked at them. "I have little food," she said. "We did not come for food," the monk replied. "Then why are you here?" "I heard you have been waiting for someone." The woman knew immediately what he meant. Her face became cold. "I am not waiting for her." The monk looked at the empty stool near the wall. There were 2 cups beside it. One cup was clean, the other was covered with dust. "You still keep a place for her," he said. The woman looked away. She should come. Perhaps. She should apologize. Perhaps. She ruined my name. Yes. She made people doubt me. Yes. She caused this pain. The monk nodded. Then he asked, "And who is keeping the pain alive now?" The woman looked at him sharply. "You think this is my fault?" "No," he said. "What happened to you was not your fault. But what you continue carrying has become your responsibility." She did not like this answer. Most of us do not. We want someone to confirm that because another person caused the wound. Only that person can heal it. We place the key to our peace in their hands. Then we wait. We wait for the apology. We wait for the explanation. We wait for them to understand what they did. We say, "I cannot move on until they admit it." But sometimes they never admit it. Sometimes they do not remember it the way we do. Sometimes pride is stronger than love. Sometimes the apology comes too late. And sometimes it never comes at all. The monk sat beside the door. The farmer remained quiet. The woman said, "You do not understand. My sister knows the truth. She knows I did not take that money." "Then why has she not returned?" "Because she is proud." "Can you control her pride?" "No." "Can you control her words?" "No." "Can you control whether she understands your pain?" The woman was silent. The monk continued. "Then your peace is tied to something outside your hands." She folded her arms. "What should I do? Pretend it never happened?" "No." "Say she was right?" "No." "Invite her back as if nothing happened?" "No." "Then what does letting go mean?" "It means you stop asking her decision to decide whether you can live." The room became quiet. Outside, someone pulled water from the well. A child laughed nearby. Life was moving. It had been moving all these years, but part of the woman had remained in the same moment. The moment of accusation. The moment people turned toward her. The moment her sister refused to listen. This is how pain becomes a home. At first, we only visit it. Then we return often. Then one day we notice we have built our life inside it. The woman said, "If I let go, she wins." The monk shook his head. "This is not a contest. It feels like one. That is why you are tired." She sat down. The farmer recognized the look on her face. It was the same look he had worn while staring at the sky, the look of someone fighting what would not obey. The monk picked up the dusty cup. "How long has this been here?" 7 years. "You have cleaned her cup many times." "At first." "Why did you stop?" "Because she was not coming." "But you still keep it." The woman touched the table. "I wanted her to know there was still a place for her." "And now?" "Now I do not know." The monk placed the cup in her hands. "This cup is not your sister." She looked down at it. "It is your waiting." The woman held it tightly. For 7 years she had imagined the same scene. Her sister would arrive. She would cry. She would confess. She would say, "You were right. I was wrong. Forgive me." The woman had repeated this scene so many times that it felt like a memory, but it had never happened. She was living inside a future that depended on another person. This is another form of attachment. We do not only attach ourselves to people and things, we attach ourselves to the words we believe must be spoken. We attach ourselves to the ending we think we deserve. We say, this story cannot end until the other person says the right thing. But life may turn the page without giving us that sentence. The monk said, "You may never receive the apology." The woman's eyes filled. He did not soften the truth. Buddhist teaching does not ask us to become cruel. It asks us to become clear. Clarity can hurt at first, but confusion can hurt for years. The woman whispered, "Then I will never have peace." The monk answered, "Only if you continue believing peace belongs to her." He pointed toward her chest. "She may owe you an apology, but she does not own your mind." The woman began to cry, not loudly. It was the kind of crying that came from somewhere old. For years, anger had protected her from grief. Anger gave her something to do. It gave her someone to blame. It kept her standing. But beneath it was a simpler pain. She missed her sister. She missed who they had been before the accusation. She missed the meals they shared. She missed the way they laughed as children. She missed a life that could not return exactly as it was. This was the truth she had avoided. She was not only waiting for an apology, she was waiting for the past to come back. But the past belongs to no one, not even to those who remember it best. The monk allowed her to cry. He did not interrupt. He did not tell her to forgive quickly. Real letting go is not a performance. It cannot be forced. It begins when the heart becomes tired of carrying what the hands cannot change. After some time, the woman wiped her face. "What do I do with the cup?" "That is for you to decide." She looked at it, then she walked outside. Near the house stood a small flowering tree. She dug a shallow hole beneath it and placed the cup inside. The farmer watched her cover it with soil. "Why bury it?" he asked. "Because I'm done drinking from it," she said. The monk smiled. She was not burying her sister. She was burying the demand that peace must wait, the demand that the past must be repaired before the present could be lived, the demand that another person's pride must change before her own heart could rest. The next morning, she removed the second stool from beside the wall. Not because her sister could never return. She could, and if she did, the woman would listen. But the house would no longer be arranged around her absence. This is what letting go looks like. Not forgetting, not approving, not pretending the wound was small. It means refusing to build your whole life around what another person refuses to give. The woman still felt pain, but the pain had room to move. It was no longer locked inside one demand. She began visiting neighbors again. She laughed without feeling guilty. She stopped asking everyone whether they had heard from her sister. Days became lighter, not because the past changed, because she stopped asking it to. One afternoon, a traveler passed through the village. He carried cloth and spices from a nearby town. While drinking water, he told the woman about a wealthy merchant who had become deeply troubled. "He spends every day asking what people say about him," the traveler explained. "He pays servants to listen in markets. He changes his clothes to please important men. He gives gifts only where others can see him. One bad rumor keeps him awake all night." The woman looked at the monk. The monk looked toward the road. The farmer understood. The sky had been his prison. An apology had been hers. Now another man had placed his peace inside the mouths of strangers. The monk lifted his staff. The farmer followed. The woman stood at her doorway and watched them leave. Then, after a moment, she joined them. Together, they walked toward the town where a merchant was desperately trying to control what everyone thought of him. The road from the village led them toward a town filled with noise. The farmer had stopped fighting the sky. The woman had stopped waiting for one sentence. Now they were going to meet a man who had placed his peace inside the opinions of everyone around him. The merchant owned the largest shop in town. He sold fine cloth, spices, carved boxes, lamps and jewelry brought from distant places. People knew his name. They praised his success. They admired his clothes. They spoke about the size of his house. From the outside, he appeared to have everything a person could want, but he was never at rest. Each morning, the merchant stood before 3 mirrors. He changed his clothes again and again. If an important customer was coming, he wore rich colors. If a poor farmer entered, he wore simple cloth and spoke as if money meant nothing to him. If monks passed his shop, he lowered his voice and spoke about generosity. If wealthy officials arrived, he spoke proudly about power and influence. He became whoever he believed the person before him would admire. At first, this seemed to work. Customers praised him. "You are wise," one said. "You are generous," said another. "You understand ordinary people. You belong among great men." Every compliment gave him a small moment of relief. Then the relief disappeared. He needed another compliment, then another. Praise was like drinking salt water. The more he received, the thirstier he became. We recognize this. Most people want to be liked. There is nothing strange about that. We want others to see the good in us. We want our efforts to be noticed. We want to feel that we belong. But the wish to be appreciated can quietly become the need to be approved. Then something changes. We stop asking, "What is true?" We begin asking, "What will make them praise me?" The merchant had forgotten the sound of his own voice. He knew how to speak to customers. He knew how to flatter officials. He knew how to impress strangers. But when he was alone, he did not know who he was. One morning, a servant entered the shop looking frightened. "Master," he said, "someone in the market said your cloth is too expensive." The merchant's face changed. "Who said it?" "I do not know." "Find out. It may have been a traveler. Then ask where he came from." The servant hesitated. It was only one comment. The merchant struck the table. One comment becomes 10. 10 become a rumor becomes a reputation. He sent servants into the market to listen. He ordered them to report every word spoken about him. At first, they told him many good things. People praised his shop. They praised his taste. They praised his wealth. But he barely heard those words. His mind searched for criticism. One person said he talked too much. Another said he smiled only when rich customers entered. Someone else said his generosity always had an audience. The merchant could not sleep. He remembered every negative word. Praise entered his mind and disappeared. Criticism entered and built a house. This is what happens when we depend on approval. 10 people may speak kindly, but one unkind voice becomes the only voice we hear. Why? Because when our value depends on others, criticism feels like danger. It does not feel like one person's opinion. It feels like our whole identity is being taken away. The monk, the farmer, and the woman arrived at the merchant's shop near midday. The merchant greeted them warmly because many people were watching. "Welcome," he said loudly. "Monks always receive food from me." He ordered his servants to bring rice, fruit, and tea. Then he looked around to make sure the customers had noticed. The monk noticed this. He sat quietly. The merchant began speaking about his generosity. "I have helped many people," he said. "Everyone in this town knows my good heart." The woman asked, "If your heart is good, why must everyone know?" The merchant looked at her. He did not like the question. The monk lifted his tea. "Is the tea sweet because people praise it?" "No," the merchant replied. "Does it become bitter because someone dislikes it?" "No." "Then why have you given strangers the power to decide your nature?" The merchant laughed. "A person's reputation matters." "Yes," the monk said, "but reputation and character are not the same." "What is the difference?" "Character is what you practice. Reputation is what others believe you practice. The merchant became quiet. The monk continued, "You can guide your actions. You cannot control every story told about them." The merchant looked toward the market. "You do not understand business. Trust is everything." "Trust matters," said the monk, "but trying to control every opinion is not trust. It is fear." The merchant's smile disappeared. He asked the servants to leave. When they were alone, he said, "My father lost everything because of a rumor." Now the truth began to appear. Years earlier, his father had owned a smaller shop. Someone accused him of using false weights. The accusation was never proved. Still, customers stopped coming. The family became poor. The merchant had watched his father lose his business, his confidence, and his health. As a boy, he made a promise. No one would ever speak badly of him. He would become so respected that no rumor could hurt him. But the promise had become a prison. He built a larger shop. He wore finer clothes. He pleased powerful people. He gave public gifts. Yet the fear remained. The more he gained, the more he feared losing it. The monk said, "You are still trying to protect the frightened boy you once were." The merchant looked down. He saw what one opinion could do. Yes, then was he wrong to be afraid? No, but fear made a promise that life cannot keep. The merchant looked at him. "What promise?" "That if everyone praises you, you will be safe." The room became still. No one can control every mind. People see us through their own wounds, desires, envy, memories, and expectations. One person may call us quiet, another may call us proud. One may see kindness, another may suspect weakness. We can stand before two people in the same moment and become two different stories inside their minds. Trying to control those stories will divide us into endless versions of ourselves. The monk said, "If you change for every person who returns home at night." The merchant had no answer. For years he had dressed for praise. He had spoken for praise. He had given for praise. Even his kindness carried the hidden question, "Did you see me?" The woman understood him. She had waited for her sister to give her peace. The merchant waited for strangers to give him worth. Different people, the same chain. The monk asked him to close the shop for one afternoon. The merchant refused. "What will people think?" The monk smiled. "That is exactly why you must do it." At last the merchant agreed. He removed his expensive outer robe. He sat in the empty shop wearing plain cloth. For the first time in years, he did nothing to impress anyone. At once, his mind became restless. What if customers leave? What if people think I am ill? What if another shop sells more today? The thoughts came quickly. The monk said, "Let them come." The merchant sat. His fear grew. He wanted to stand at the door. He wanted to explain himself. He wanted to send servants into the market. But he remained seated. After a long time, the fear weakened. The town continued without him. People talked. People bought things elsewhere. Some wondered why the shop was closed. Others did not notice. The merchant discovered something painful and freeing. He was not the center of every mind. Most people were busy carrying their own worries. The next morning, he opened the shop. He wore clothes he liked. He charged fair prices. He spoke honestly. Some customers praised him. Some complained. He listened when criticism was useful. He released it when it was cruel or false. This was not easy. Letting go rarely happens in one perfect moment. It is a practice. Again and again he felt the old fear return. Again and again he asked, "Is this mine to guide?" His actions were his prices were his honesty was his, other people's opinions were not. Slowly he became less impressive and more real. Some people liked him more, some liked him less. But for the first time, he could close the shop and still know who he was. Before the monk left, the merchant said, There is someone else who needs this lesson." "Who?" asked the farmer. "My son." The merchant looked toward the upper floor, where the young man spent his nights surrounded by plans, maps, and lists. "He believes he can prepare for every danger before it comes. He is trying to control his whole future." The monk lifted his staff. The merchant led them upstairs. Behind a closed door sat a young man who had planned every year of a life that had not yet begun. The merchant led them upstairs. Behind the closed door, his son was still planning a life that had not yet happened. The farmer had tried to control the sky. The woman had tried to control an apology. The merchant had tried to control every opinion. Now the young man was trying to control tomorrow. His room was filled with papers. Some were covered with numbers, others held maps, lists, and carefully drawn plans. One wall showed the work he would do each year. Another showed how much money he would save. A third held a list of everything that might go wrong: illness, bad weather, failed business, theft, war, loneliness, the death of his father, the loss of his home. The young man had prepared an answer for each danger. At least he believed he had. He slept very little. Each night, when the town became quiet, his mind became louder. What if the shop failed? What if he chose the wrong wife? What if he moved away and regretted it? What if he stayed and missed a better life? What if illness came before he had enough money? What if his plans were not enough? The more he thought, the less safe he felt. We recognize this. The mind often tells us that one more hour of thinking will bring peace, one more plan, one more answer, one more way to protect ourselves from what might happen. But fear is clever. It rarely says, "I want to control everything." It says, "I am only being careful." There is wisdom in preparing. There is wisdom in saving money, caring for the body, learning useful skills, and thinking before acting. But preparation has a natural end. Fear does not. Fear keeps asking for one more guarantee, and life cannot give it. The monk entered the room and looked at the papers. The young man barely noticed him. He was writing quickly. "What are you doing?" the monk asked. "Preparing." "For what?" The young man pointed around the room. "For my life." The monk looked through the open window. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. Children were playing in the street. A food seller was calling to customers. Birds were returning to the rooftops. Life was happening. The young man was too busy preparing for it to notice. His father said, "He has been like this for years." The young man looked up. "And your years of worrying about your reputation were better." The merchant became quiet. The monk almost smiled. Fear can see fear clearly in everyone except itself. The young man said, "I do not want to repeat my father's mistakes." "That is understandable," the monk replied. "I want to make the right choices." "That is also understandable." "I want to know what will happen before I choose." "That is impossible." The young man stopped writing. "You do not know that." The monk walked toward the table. He picked up one of the plans. It described what the young man would do over the next 10 years. "You have written where you will live." "Yes." "What work you will do." "Yes." "How much you will earn." "Yes." "Whom you will marry." "I have not chosen the person, only the right qualities." The woman standing near the door looked at the long list. The young man had written that his future wife must be calm but not quiet, intelligent but not proud, beautiful but not vain, careful with money but generous, and strong but always willing to follow his plans. The woman asked, "Have you planned what she will want?" The young man frowned. "I will choose someone who wants the same life." "How will you control what she wants 10 years later?" He had no answer. The monk placed the paper down. "Your plans are not the problem," he said. "Your belief about them is." "What belief?" "That enough thinking can remove uncertainty." The young man looked around the room. "That is why people plan." "No. Wise people plan so they can meet uncertainty with greater skill. Frightened people plan because they believe uncertainty can be destroyed." The room became still. This is an important difference. A plan can guide the next step. It cannot control the whole road. We suffer when we demand more from a plan than it can give. We ask it to promise that no one will leave, that our bodies will remain strong, that our work will succeed, that the people we love will be safe, that the future will reward us for being careful, but no plan can make these promises. The young man said, "What should I do? Walk blindly into life?" The monk shook his head. "Look clearly at the ground beneath your feet, but stop demanding to see the entire road. What if danger is ahead? There will be danger. What if I fail? You will fail at something. What if I lose someone? You will lose people, and people will lose you." The young man's face tightened. The monk continued gently, "This is not a curse. It is the nature of being alive." Buddhist teaching does not promise a life without uncertainty. It teaches us how to live without being destroyed by it. Everything changes. This is impermanence. Bodies change, plans change, relationships change. Good seasons end. Hard seasons also end. The frightened mind hears this and says, "Then I must control more." The wise mind hears it and says, "Then I must be present." The monk asked the young man to leave the room. "I cannot," he replied. "Why?" "I have work to finish." "Will tomorrow refuse to come if you stop writing?" The young man looked at the papers. "No." "Then come downstairs." They walked into the street. At first, the young man kept looking back at the house. He felt as though danger might enter the moment he stopped watching. The monk led him through the market. A baker was closing his stall. A child was helping her mother carry fruit. 2 old men were laughing beside a doorway. The young man had passed these people many times. He had rarely seen them. His body lived in the town. His mind lived years ahead. At the edge of the market, the monk stopped. "What do you hear?" The young man listened. "People talking." "What else?" "A dog barking." "What else?" "Someone playing a flute." "What else?" The young man took a slow breath. "The wind." The monk nodded. "Where are your dangers now?" "In the future." "And where are you?" "Here." "Then why are you living there?" The young man wanted to answer, but something inside him became tired. He had spent so much of his life trying to arrive before life did. He had imagined pain that never came. He had held conversations that never happened. He had suffered failures that existed only on paper. This is how fear steals the present. It does not always arrive as panic. Sometimes it arrives as endless preparation. We call it responsibility. But beneath it is the belief that worry protects us. Worry does not protect us from tomorrow. It only makes us experience tomorrow's possible pain today. And when tomorrow comes, if the pain is real, we suffer again. The monk asked the young man to remove 1 paper from his room each night. "Which paper?" "Any plan that reaches farther than wisdom can see." "How far can wisdom see?" "Usually 1 honest step." The young man did not like this. 1 step felt too small. Fear prefers 10 years. 10 years creates the feeling of power. 1 step requires trust. But that night, he removed 1 paper. It was a plan about where he would live at the age of 40. He had not yet reached 25. The next night, he removed a list of illnesses he might develop. The night after that, he removed a plan for protecting himself from friends who might betray him. Each paper felt important. Each one seemed like protection. But as the walls became empty, the room became quieter. He began sleeping earlier. He still planned his work. He still saved money. He still thought carefully before making choices. But he stopped trying to build a perfect answer for every possible future. When fear asked, "What if something goes wrong?" he answered, "Then I will meet what is real when it becomes real." This did not remove uncertainty. It returned his life to him. One morning, the young man opened his window before touching his papers. Rain had fallen during the night. The farmer smiled when he saw the wet street, but he did not lift his hands to command the clouds. The woman heard two sisters laughing near the well. She felt an old ache, but she did not return to waiting. The merchant heard a customer criticize his prices. He listened calmly and continued his work. Each of them was still practicing. Letting go is not one lesson learned once. It is a choice made again whenever the mind reaches for control. The young man joined the monk outside. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To the river." "Why?" "There is a mother living there with her son." "What is wrong with him?" "Nothing," the monk said. "That is the problem." The young man did not understand. The monk explained that the mother had already chosen her son's work, his friends, the woman he should marry, and the life he should live. "She calls it love," the monk said. The young man looked back at his half-empty room. He knew what it was like to plan a life before it began. So he followed the monk, the farmer, the woman, and his father toward a small house beside the river, where a mother was trying to write her child's future for him. The road to the river was quiet. The young man had stopped trying to plan every year ahead. Now he was going to meet a mother who had planned another person's whole life. The house stood beneath a wide tree near the water. A woman was waiting outside. Beside her stood her son. He was old enough to choose his own path, but he looked like someone who had never been allowed to take one step alone. The mother greeted the monk with respect. Then she began speaking before anyone asked a question. "My son is confused," she said. "He wants to leave the village and work near the river." The son lowered his eyes. The mother continued, "I have already found better work for him in the town. A merchant needs a trusted assistant. The pay is good. The work is safe. I have also spoken to a family about marriage. Their daughter is quiet and respectful." The son said nothing. The monk looked at him. "What do you want?" Before he could answer, his mother spoke. "He does not know what he wants." The monk waited. The silence became uncomfortable. At last, the son said, "I want to work with boats." His mother shook her head. "Boats are dangerous." "I know. The river changes quickly." "I know." "You could drown." "I know." "You see," she said to the monk, "he understands nothing." The son looked away. We recognize this kind of love. It begins with care. A mother sees danger before a child can see it. She protects him from fire. She keeps him close when the road is unsafe. She teaches him what to avoid. For many years, this protection is necessary. But children grow, and sometimes love does not know how to grow with them. The hand that once protected can become the hand that refuses to release. The mother in this story believed she was saving her son from pain. She did not notice that she was also saving him from life. She had chosen his work. She had chosen where he would live. She had chosen the kind of woman he should marry. She had even chosen which friends were good enough for him. Whenever he disagreed, she reminded him of everything she had sacrificed. "I raised you alone," she would say. "I worked when I was sick. I went hungry so you could eat. I gave you my whole life." All of this was true, and because it was true, the son felt guilty. He believed choosing his own path meant rejecting her love. So he remained. He smiled when she needed him to smile. He agreed when she needed him to agree. But something inside him became smaller. The monk sat beneath the tree. The mother sat across from him. The farmer, the woman, the merchant, and the young man remained nearby. Each of them understood something about control now. but control looks different when it wears the face of love. The monk asked, "Why do you want your son to work in town?" "Because it is safer." "Why do you want him to marry the woman you chose?" "Because she comes from a good family." "Why do you want him to remain near you?" "Because I know what is best." The monk nodded. "And if he follows every plan you have made, can you promise he will be happy?" The mother hesitated. "I can promise he will be protected from everything." She looked toward the river. "No one can promise that." "Then what are you trying to protect him from?" She became quiet. The answer was not simple. She wanted to protect him from poverty, from disappointment, from wrong choices, from people who might hurt him. But beneath all of this was another fear. She wanted to protect herself from losing him. Her husband had died when their son was very young. Since that day, the boy had become the center of her life. Every hope rested on him. Every fear surrounded him. Every plan included him. She had not only raised a son, she had built her whole reason for living around his presence. If he left, she did not know who she would be. This is where care becomes control. We say, "I only want what is best for you," but hidden beneath those words may be another truth. "I need your life to make me feel safe." The mother said, "If he leaves and something happens, I will never forgive myself." The monk replied, "And if he stays and never becomes himself, will you forgive yourself then?" The question reached her. She looked at her son. For the first time, she saw more than the child she had protected. She saw a young man with his own mind, his own hopes, his own fear, his own path. Buddhist teaching reminds us that no person belongs to us, not a child, not a partner, not a friend. We walk together for a time. We care for one another. We guide where guidance is needed. But every being carries their own karma, their own choices, and their own path through life. Love cannot remove this truth. Love must learn to respect it. The mother asked, "Should I let him make foolish choices?" The monk said, "You may warn him." "Should I stay silent if I see danger?" "No, speak honestly." "Then what must I stop doing?" "Stop believing that your fear gives you ownership of his future." The mother looked down at her hands. Those hands had washed him when he was small, fed him, carried him through illness, held him when he cried. They had done so much good, but now they were holding too tightly. The monk picked up a small bird feather from the ground. He placed it in her palm. "Close your hand," he said. She did. "Now keep it safe." She held it tightly. When she opened her hand, the feather was bent. The monk said, "You protected it from the wind." The mother looked at the damaged feather. "But I harmed it." "Yes." The son watched her. Something moved across her face. Love had told her that holding tightly was the same as caring deeply. Now she saw that this was not always true. Sometimes love protects. Sometimes love releases. Wisdom is knowing which moment has arrived. The mother turned to her son. "Why do you want to work with boats?" He looked surprised that she had asked. "I like the river," he said. "That is not enough." "I know. I have been learning from the fisherman. I can repair nets. I can read the current near the shallow banks. I want to learn more." "Why did you not tell me?" "I tried." She remembered the conversations. Each time he had begun, she had answered before he finished. She had not listened to understand him. She had listened only for danger. The son continued, "I do not want to leave because I hate you." The mother's eyes filled with tears. "I know." But she had not known. Not until that moment. She had treated his independence like a wound against her. She had confused distance with rejection. Many people do this. When someone we love chooses a different path, fear speaks quickly. It says, "They no longer need me. They are leaving me behind." My love was not enough. But another person's freedom is not always a rejection. Sometimes it is the natural result of what our care helped them become. The purpose of raising a child is not to keep the child forever. It is to help them become able to walk without us. This truth is beautiful. It is also painful. The mother began to cry. Her son moved closer. She said, "I am afraid. I know. I do not trust the river. I will respect it. I do not trust the people you may meet. I will be careful. I do not trust life." The monk said softly, "None of us can make life harmless." The mother looked at him. "Then how do we love without fear? You do not wait for fear to disappear. You love while knowing you cannot control the ending." That is the courage of love. To care without possession, to guide without forcing, to remain open even when we cannot guarantee what will happen. The mother did not suddenly lose all fear. Letting go does not work like that. Fear returned the next morning when her son packed his clothes. It returned when he tied his sandals. It returned when he stood at the road. Her mind showed her every possible tragedy. She wanted to tell him to stay. She wanted to become ill so he would feel guilty. She wanted to remind him of every sacrifice. Instead, she took a breath. She said, "Be careful near deep water." He smiled. "I will. Come home when you can." "I will." Then she handed him food for the road. This time, her hands gave without closing. The son bowed to her. Then he walked toward the river. The mother watched him go. Her heart hurt. But not every pain means something is wrong. Some pain comes from allowing life to move as it must. The monk stood beside her. "You have not lost him," he said. "I know." But her voice trembled. She watched until her son became small in the distance. Then she went inside a house that felt larger than before. For the first time in many years, she had to meet her own life again. Near the river, her son found an old fisherman struggling with his boat. The current was strong. The fisherman pulled the rope with both hands, cursing the water for refusing to move the way he wanted. The young man dropped his bag and ran to help. Behind him, the monk and the others followed. They had met a farmer who fought the sky. Now they were about to meet a fisherman fighting the river. The mother's son reached the river before the monk and the others. There he found an old fisherman pulling at a rope and shouting at the water. The young man had just been released from a life planned for him. Now he was about to meet someone who had planned a direction for the river. The old fisherman had worked on that water for most of his life. He knew every bend. He knew where fish gathered before sunrise. He knew which rocks waited beneath the surface. He knew how the river sounded before a storm. People trusted him. Young fishermen came to him for advice, but age had made him proud of what he knew. He had crossed the river the same way for many years. He left from the same bank. He followed the same path. He reached the same fishing ground. Then, one season, heavy rain changed the current. The river became stronger. Water rushed through a new channel. The old path was no longer easy, but the fisherman refused to change. "This is the way I have always gone," he said. Each morning, he pushed his boat into the water. Each morning, the current drove him back. He rowed harder. The river pushed harder. He shouted. He cursed the rain. He blamed the rocks. He blamed younger fishermen for choosing an easier path. By midday, his arms shook. His hands bled. His boat had barely moved. Still, he refused to turn. We recognize this. Sometimes life changes direction before the mind is ready. A job ends. A body grows weaker. A relationship changes. A child leaves home. A plan fails. The river moves. But we keep rowing toward the place that no longer exists. We say, it should still work. This is how it has always been. I should not have to change. Then we spend all our strength fighting what has already changed. The mother's son ran toward the old fisherman. "Let me help you." "I do not need help," the fisherman said. The current pulled the boat sideways. The young man grabbed the rope before it slipped away. The old fisherman looked at him. "You are the woman's boy." "I am." She finally allowed you to leave? She did. The fisherman laughed. Then do not begin your freedom by telling an old man how to handle his river. The young man looked at the water. It is not your river. The fisherman's face hardened. I have worked here longer than you have been alive. That means you know it well. I know it better than anyone. Then you should know it has changed. The fisherman did not answer. The monk, the farmer, the woman, the merchant and his son arrived at the bank. They saw the old man climb into his boat again. The monk called out, "Where are you going?" "Across. The current is too strong there." "I know. Then why choose that path?" "Because it is my path." The monk watched him row. The boat moved forward a little. Then the current pushed it back. The fisherman bent low and pulled harder. His face tightened. His breath became rough. The boat turned. He struck the side with his oar. The monk said, "The river is not insulting you." The fisherman looked toward him. "It is blocking me." "No, it is moving. It is moving against me. The river does not know you are there." The fisherman hated this answer. Pain often feels personal. When life refuses our plans, we say it has chosen against us. But the rain did not hate the farmer. The sister's silence did not exist only to punish the woman. Strangers did not wake each morning thinking about the merchant. Tomorrow was not hunting his son. And the river was not fighting the fisherman. It was simply following its conditions. The monk said, "You are giving the river an anger it does not have." The fisherman rowed back to the bank. He stepped out, breathing heavily. "What should I do?" he asked. "Give up fishing?" A younger fisherman nearby shook his head. "No, change the crossing." The old man turned toward him. The younger fisherman pointed downstream. "There is a slower bend beyond the reeds. We can follow the current, cross there, and return along the eastern bank. That path takes longer. It takes less strength. It is not the direct way. It reaches the same water." The old fisherman looked away. The answer was simple. That was why he resisted it. He did not want a new path. He wanted the old path to work again. This is how attachment hides inside habit. We do not always cling to objects. Sometimes we cling to methods, to roles, to the way people once treated us, to what our bodies once allowed us to do, to the version of life we understand. We call our refusal strength, but strength without wisdom becomes waste. The monk sat on a flat stone. He asked the fisherman, "What is your true purpose?" "To reach the fishing ground." "Is your purpose to reach it, or to prove you can still reach it the old way?" The fisherman looked at his wounded hands. For many days he had caught almost nothing. His family had less food. His body hurt, yet he had continued. The crossing was no longer about fish. It was about pride. If he changed direction, he feared people would think age had defeated him. He feared the younger men would no longer need his advice. He feared that accepting the river's change meant accepting his own. The fisherman said, "When I was young, I could cross this current even when it was strong." The monk nodded. "And now?" "I am not as strong." The words were difficult for him. The truth often is. But a truth spoken clearly loses some of its power to shame us. The monk said, "A weaker arm is not a weaker life." The fisherman remained silent. "Your body has changed," the monk continued. "The river has changed. Wisdom must also change." The old man looked at the younger fisherman. "You think I know nothing now?" "No," the young man said. "I think you know too much to keep hurting yourself like this." The fisherman almost smiled. The younger man had not come to replace him. He had come to help him see what pride had hidden. Buddhist teaching speaks about the middle way. It is not a path of forcing. It is not a path of giving up. It is the path that sees conditions clearly and responds without pride. A person who fights every current becomes exhausted. A person who surrenders to every current may be carried anywhere. Wisdom is neither blind resistance nor helpless drifting. Wisdom knows when to row, when to wait, when to turn, and when to let the water carry part of the weight. The next morning, the fisherman agreed to try the path downstream. He hated how easy the younger man made it look. They pushed the boat into the current. This time they did not point directly across. They turned with the water. At first, the old fisherman felt as though they were moving away from their goal. He said, "We are going in the wrong direction." The younger fisherman replied, "Only for a while." They passed the reeds. The water became calmer. There they crossed. The old man rowed steadily. His arms still worked. His knowledge still mattered. He noticed a hidden rock before the younger fisherman did. He showed him how to read the small circles on the surface where fish moved below. They reached the fishing ground with strength left in their bodies. The old fisherman looked back at the river. Nothing had been defeated. The current had not lost. He had not lost. A struggle had simply become unnecessary. This is difficult for the mind to understand. We often believe peace requires victory. Someone must be wrong. Something must surrender. The river must bend. The person must apologize. The future must become certain. But many of life's deepest battles end without anyone winning. They end because we stop fighting what never came to fight us. The old fisherman worked beside the younger man. Together they filled part of the boat, not as much as he had caught in his strongest years, but enough. On the return journey, he let the current carry them farther than before. He did not feel weak. He felt supported. The same water he had cursed now helped bring him home. Nothing about the river had changed that day. Only his relationship with it had changed. When they reached the bank, the fisherman showed the mother's son how to tie a strong knot. "You still want to work with boats?" he asked. "Yes." "Then learn this first. Never treat the river like a servant." The young man nodded. "What should I treat it like?" "A teacher." They walked downstream to pull the boat onto dry land. There, they noticed someone beneath a dying tree. A young monk was carrying water in a broken bowl. He poured it around the roots. Then he hurried back toward a spring. The tree had lost most of its leaves. Its trunk was dark and split. The old fisherman watched the monk return with another bowl of water. "That tree is dying," he said. The young monk ignored him. He poured more water into the dry soil. The older monk looked at the tree, then at the exhausted young monk. The farmer had once begged the clouds to save his field. The fisherman had fought the river's direction. Now someone else was trying to command life to remain where it had already begun to leave. They walked toward the tree. The fisherman stopped fighting the river. Then he saw a young monk fighting the end of a tree. The tree stood near the water. Its branches were thin. Most of its leaves had fallen. The bark had split along one side. Still, the young monk carried water to it from morning until night. He used an old bowl with a crack near the bottom. Half the water escaped before he reached the roots. He kept going anyway, back and forth, back and forth. His robe was wet. His feet were covered with mud. His hands shook from tiredness, but he would not stop. The older monk stood beneath the tree and watched him. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. 7 days. "Have you slept?" "A little." "Have you eaten?" "When I remember." The young monk poured another bowl of water around the roots. The soil became dark for a moment. Then it swallowed everything. "This tree needs me," he said. The fisherman looked up at the dead branches. The tree needed rain many seasons ago. The young monk became angry. "It is not dead." "No," said the older monk, "not yet." "Then there is still hope." "There is always some hope," the older monk replied. But hope is not the same as refusal. The young monk did not understand. He had cared for the tree since he entered the monastery as a boy. He had studied beneath it. He had slept in its shade during hot afternoons. His teacher had once sat there and explained the Four Noble Truths. Travelers had rested beneath its branches. Birds had built nests there. Children had tied small ribbons around the trunk. The tree was part of his memory, part of his practice, part of his home. He could not imagine the monastery without it. We recognize this. Sometimes we hold on not because something is still living, but because it has carried so much of our life. A house, a friendship, a role, a body that has changed, a dream that no longer fits. We tell ourselves we are being loyal. We tell ourselves we are being hopeful. But beneath hope, there may be fear. The fear that if this ends, a part of us ends with it. The young monk touched the trunk. My teacher planted this tree. The older monk looked at him. I know. You taught me under it. I know. Then why are you so calm? Because calm does not mean I do not care. The young monk looked at him with pain. It feels like you have already abandoned it. No, the older monk said. I am allowing it to be what it is. What it is. A tree reaching the end of its season. The young monk shook his head. You cannot know that. The older monk pointed toward the branches. Look carefully. The young monk looked. One branch had become hollow. Another had broken in the last storm. Small insects moved beneath the loose bark. The roots near the surface had turned soft. He had seen all of this before, but he had refused to see it together. The mind can do this when truth hurts. It notices each sign. Then it separates them. It says, this part can be repaired. This part may improve. This does not mean the whole thing is ending. Hope becomes a curtain. Behind it, reality waits. The older monk said, compassion begins with seeing clearly. I am trying to save it. Perhaps you are trying to save yourself from losing it. The young monk became still. The words hurt because they were close to the truth. He had not only been watering the tree, he had been watering memory. He wanted one more season beneath its shade, one more lesson there, one more morning when everything looked as it had before. He wanted time to turn back. The farmer understood him. He had once wanted the clouds to return. The woman understood him. She had wanted her sister to restore the past. The merchant understood him. He had wanted praise to keep his life safe. The young man understood him. He had wanted plans to prevent change. The mother understood him. She had wanted her son to remain near. The fisherman understood him. He had wanted the old river path to stay the same. Different lives. The same hand closing around what was moving away. The young monk said, if I stop watering it, I will be the reason it dies. The older monk replied, no, you are not that powerful. The young monk looked shocked. The older monk continued, you did not create this tree alone. You cannot command its ending. Many conditions brought it here. Soil, rain, sun, wind, age, disease, time. But my care matters. Yes, care matters. Then I should continue. Care does not always mean keeping something alive at any cost. The young monk looked at the bowl in his hands. This is a difficult Buddhist lesson. Compassion is not control. Compassion does not say, you must remain because I cannot bear your leaving. Compassion says, I will meet you honestly, even here. Sometimes compassion feeds, sometimes it protects, sometimes it repairs, and sometimes compassion sits beside what cannot be repaired. Not because it has failed, because it understands impermanence. Everything formed will change. Everything that begins will move toward an ending. The body, the tree, the season, the relationship, the breath. We know this in the mind, but the heart learns it slowly. The young monk asked, "Should I do nothing?" "No," said his teacher. "Give it what is useful. Remove the broken branches before they harm someone. Keep people away during strong wind. Sit with it. Thank it. But stop demanding that care must defeat time." The young monk lowered the bowl. For the first time in 7 days he sat down. He rested his back against the trunk. The tree felt rough and warm from the sun. He closed his eyes. Memories came. His first day at the monastery, his teacher's voice, the sound of leaves moving above him, the fear he felt as a boy, the peace he found there. Tears came quietly. He had been too busy saving the tree to grieve it. This happens to us. We turn pain into work. We keep fixing, calling, planning, pushing, because action feels safer than sorrow. As long as we are trying, we do not have to admit that something may be ending. But grief waits beneath the effort. It does not disappear because the hands remain busy. The older monk sat beside him. They said nothing for a long time. The next morning, the young monk watered the tree once. Not because he believed one bowl would save it, because the roots were still alive enough to receive some water. Then he ate. He slept. He returned to his duties. Each evening he sat beneath the branches. He stopped asking, "How can I make you stay?" He began asking, "How can I be present while you are here?" The question changed everything. The tree was still dying, but the young monk was no longer missing its final days by fighting them. He noticed the last green leaves. He noticed the birds choosing other branches. He noticed sunlight reaching the ground in places that had always been shaded. Loss was already changing the world around it. Not all change was cruel. Some small plants began growing near the roots. They had waited years for light. This did not make the loss easy, but it made the ending larger than pain. Buddhist wisdom does not ask us to pretend that endings are beautiful. Some endings break the heart. But even then, nothing disappears without becoming part of something else. A fallen leaf becomes soil. A memory becomes guidance. A sorrow becomes compassion for another person's sorrow. The form changes. The influence continues. One night a storm came. The wind moved hard through the valley. The young monk woke before dawn. He ran outside. The tree was bending. The trunk made a deep sound. He wanted to rush toward it. His teacher caught his arm. "You cannot hold it. I have to try." "No." The tree bent again. Then, with one long crack, it fell. The ground shook. Dust rose. The young monk stood frozen. The tree lay across the courtyard. Its branches were broken. Its roots reached into the air. For a moment, the monastery looked wrong. Too open, too empty. The young monk walked toward the trunk. He placed one hand on it. It was still warm. He cried. No one stopped him. Morning came slowly. The storm moved away. Birds called from another tree. The world continued. That is sometimes the hardest part of loss. The world continues before the heart is ready. The older monk said, "You stayed." The young monk looked at him. "You did not run from the ending. You were here for it." The young monk touched the trunk again. "I thought letting go would feel peaceful. Sometimes it does. And sometimes it feels like grief without resistance." The young monk understood. Peace was not the absence of sorrow. It was the absence of war with sorrow. The monks spent the day cutting the fallen branches. Some became firewood. Smaller pieces were used to repair a fence. The strongest part of the trunk was saved. A carpenter in the next town was known for making fine statues and temple doors. The older monk asked the fisherman to help carry the wood there by boat. The young monk went with him. He wanted to see what the tree might become. When they arrived, they found the carpenter sitting before a broken Buddha statue. A crack ran through its face. The carpenter had spent months making it. Now he could not accept what had happened. The young monk looked at the fallen wood beside him. He had just learned that one form could end without all meaning ending. The carpenter had not learned this yet, and so the next story began beside a broken statue. The fallen tree was carried to the carpenter's workshop. The young monk had just learned that an ending did not erase all meaning. Now he was about to meet a man who believed one crack had destroyed everything. The carpenter sat on the floor before a wooden Buddha statue. It was nearly complete. For many months he had shaped it carefully. He had chosen the strongest wood. He had drawn each line before cutting. He had carved the face slowly. The eyes were lowered. The hands rested gently. The mouth held the smallest sign of peace. People in the town had heard about the statue. It was meant for a new meditation hall. The carpenter believed it would be his greatest work. Then the storm came. Wind tore part of the roof from his workshop. Rain entered through the opening. A heavy beam fell. It struck the statue across the shoulder and face. By morning, a deep crack ran from the forehead to the chest. The carpenter found it lying on its side. He did not speak. He lifted it. He examined the damage. Then something inside him broke with it. For days, he refused to work. He sat before the statue and stared at the crack. He blamed the storm. He blamed the weak roof. He blamed the workers who had not repaired it sooner. He blamed himself for placing the statue in that part of the room. Each time someone said the statue was still beautiful, he became angry. "You do not understand," he said. "This is not what it was meant to be. We recognize this. Sometimes the pain is not only that something went wrong. The deeper pain is that reality did not match the picture we carried inside us. We had a vision, a marriage that would last, a child who would choose a certain path, a body that would remain strong, a plan that would unfold in the right order, a future that would look the way we had imagined it. Then life placed a crack through the middle, and we could not stop staring at what should have been." The young monk entered the workshop with the old fisherman. They placed the fallen tree wood near the wall. The carpenter barely looked at it. "What do you want?" he asked. "We brought wood from the monastery," the fisherman said. "I am not taking new work." The young monk looked at the statue. "It is beautiful." The carpenter's face hardened. "It is ruined." The monk walked closer. He saw the crack. It was wide near the forehead and narrow near the heart. He touched the wood gently. The carpenter pulled the statue away. "Do not touch it." "I am sorry." "You should be. People touch damaged things as if they are already worthless." The young monk understood something in those words. The carpenter was not only speaking about the statue, he was speaking about himself. This statue had carried his pride, his skill, his hope of being remembered. He believed that if the work was perfect, people would finally see him as a great carpenter. Now the crack felt like a judgment, not only against the statue, against his whole life. The older monk arrived later that afternoon. He stood in the doorway and looked at the work. The carpenter said, "Do not tell me it can be repaired." I was not going to. "Do not tell me the crack gives it character." I was not going to say that either. The carpenter looked at him. "Then what are you going to say?" "Nothing yet." The monk sat down. This made the carpenter more uncomfortable than advice would have. For a long time they remained silent. The carpenter kept looking at the statue. At last he said, "I saw it in my mind before I began." The monk nodded. "It was whole." "Yes." "Perfect." "Yes." "And now reality has failed your vision." The carpenter said, "Exactly." The monk looked at him. "Or perhaps your vision failed to include reality." The carpenter frowned. "What does that mean?" "You made room for the wood." "Yes." "You made room for your tools." "Yes." "You made room for your skill." "Yes." "But did you make room for wind?" The carpenter said nothing. "For rain?" "Nothing." "For accident?" "Nothing." "For change?" The carpenter looked away. The monk continued. You planned the statue. You did not plan the conditions around it. Yet the statue always belonged to those conditions too. The carpenter said, Then nothing can be trusted. The monk replied, Nothing can be controlled completely. That is not the same as nothing being worthy. The carpenter looked again at the crack. Buddhist teaching speaks about impermanence. People often hear this and think it means everything is hopeless. But impermanence does not mean life has no value. It means value cannot depend on lasting forever. A flower is not worthless because it fades. A meal is not meaningless because it ends. A friendship is not false because people change. A work of art is not empty because it can break. The carpenter had confused beauty with protection. He believed the statue had to remain exactly as he imagined in order to be worthy. But no form is protected from change. Not wood, not stone, not flesh, not memory. The carpenter said, I gave months to this. Yes. And one storm took it. The storm changed it. It destroyed it. Has all your work disappeared? The carpenter looked closely. The hands were still gentle. The posture remained calm. One side of the face still held the expression he had worked so hard to create. The crack had not removed everything, but his anger had made it difficult to see what remained. This is another way suffering grows. The mind becomes so fixed on what was lost that it stops seeing what is still present. A person leaves, and we say love has vanished. A plan fails, and we say all effort was wasted. A body changes, and we say life is over. One crack becomes the whole object. One ending becomes the whole story. The young monk walked toward the statue again. This time he did not touch it. He said, The tree we brought had stood at the monastery for many years. The carpenter listened. It shaded us. Birds nested in it. People rested beneath it. Then it died. What does that have to do with my statue? I thought its falling meant everything it had been was gone. The young monk pointed toward the wood they had carried. But part of it is here. The carpenter looked at the trunk. The monk continued. The tree did not remain what I wanted, but it can still become something useful. The carpenter said, You want me to make another statue? No. Then what? I want you to look at what is here before deciding what it cannot become. The carpenter did not answer. That night, he remained alone in the workshop. The storm had passed. Moonlight entered through the damaged roof. It fell across the statue. For the first time, the carpenter saw the crack without the anger of the first moment. It looked different in the soft light. Not beautiful in the way he had planned, but not empty either. The crack passed through the forehead. It made the face look as though the statue had known suffering. The carpenter almost hated himself for thinking this. He had spent years trying to carve perfect calm. Now the damage had added something his tools could not create, a history, a wound, a truth. The next morning the monk returned. The carpenter said, I still wish it had not happened. Of course. I still feel angry. Of course. But I no longer think the statue is completely ruined. The monk nodded. Letting go does not require us to say we wanted the loss. It does not demand that we call pain beautiful. It asks only that we stop making reality wrong because it did not obey our picture. The carpenter decided not to hide the crack. He cleaned it. He strengthened the weak places from behind. He polished the statue gently. He left the line visible. When people came to see it, some were disappointed. They had expected perfect wood. Others stood before it for a long time. One old woman touched her own scar while looking at the crack. A man who had lost his home in a fire began to cry. A child asked why the Buddha looked broken. The carpenter answered, "Because peaceful things can carry damage too." The statue was placed in the meditation hall. It did not look like the carpenter's first vision. It became something else, something he could not have planned. The carpenter began to understand that skill meant more than forcing material to match an idea. Skill also meant listening to what the material had become. He turned to the wood from the fallen tree. From one part he carved a low bench for the meditation hall. From another he made bowls for the monastery. One small piece remained. It was smooth and dark. A traveler entered the workshop while the carpenter held it. The traveler looked tired. Around his neck he carried an old cloth pouch. He never let it leave his hand. The carpenter asked, "What is inside?" The traveler answered, "Something I should have forgotten years ago." His voice carried more weight than the pouch. The carpenter had learned what happened when a person stared too long at one crack. He placed the small piece of wood in the traveler's palm. "Take this," he said. "Why?" "Because something broken can still become part of another journey." The traveler closed his hand around the wood. Then he touched the old pouch at his neck. Inside it was a memory he had carried across many roads. And so the next story began with a man who could travel everywhere except beyond the past. The traveler left the carpenter's workshop with the small piece of wood in his hand. The carpenter had learned to stop staring only at the crack. Now the traveler had to stop listening to a sentence that had been spoken many years before. He had crossed many towns. He had slept beside rivers. He had walked through forests, dry fields, and crowded markets. People called him a traveler because he rarely stayed anywhere for long. But there was one place he never left, a moment from his youth. A cruel sentence spoken by an older man in front of many people. "You will never become anything worth remembering." The words had been spoken during an argument. The older man had been angry. Perhaps he wanted to wound him. Perhaps he spoke without thinking. Perhaps he forgot the sentence the same day. The traveler did not forget. He carried it for years. At first, the words made him angry. Then they made him ashamed. Later, they became a voice inside him. Whenever he failed at something, the voice returned. "You will never become anything worth remembering." Whenever someone laughed nearby, he wondered if they were laughing at him. Whenever another person succeeded, he felt smaller. Whenever he tried something new, the old sentence stood beside him. It had been spoken once. He repeated it thousands of times. We recognize this. Someone speaks carelessly, a parent, a teacher, a friend, a stranger. They say we are foolish, weak, unwanted, unlovable, not good enough. The moment passes for them, but it does not pass for us. We carry the words into other rooms, into other years, into relationships with people who never said them. The mouth that first spoke may become silent. Still, the sentence continues inside us. The traveler touched the pouch around his neck. Inside it was a small stone. He had picked it up on the day of the insult. He kept it as a reminder. At first, he told himself the stone would help him prove the man wrong. He would become successful. Then he would return. He would show everyone that the sentence had been false, but his need to prove himself became another chain. Nothing was enough. If he earned money, he needed more. If people respected him, he searched for the one person who did not. If he completed a difficult journey, he felt proud only for a moment. Then the old voice returned. Not enough. Still not enough. This is what happens when our whole life becomes an argument with the past. We may appear to be moving forward, but every step is still turned backward. The traveler stopped at a small roadside shelter that evening. The monk and the others had also stopped there. The farmer was resting near the doorway. The woman was preparing tea. The merchant and his son were speaking quietly. The mother's son was learning a new knot from the fisherman. The young monk held a bowl carved from the fallen tree. Each person carried a lesson from something they could not control. The traveler sat apart. The older monk noticed the pouch. "You hold it as if someone might steal it," he said. The traveler looked up. "It is mine." "What is inside?" "Only a stone." "Then why do you guard it?" The traveler became tense. "It reminds me of something." "Does it help you remember?" "Yes." "Do you need help remembering?" The traveler said nothing. The monk sat beside him. After a long silence, the traveler opened the pouch. He placed the stone on the ground. It was ordinary, grey, smooth from years of being held. The monk asked, "What happened?" The traveler told him. He repeated the old sentence exactly. His voice changed as he spoke it. He was no longer a man who had crossed half the country. He was a frightened young person standing before a crowd. The monk listened. When the traveler finished, he asked, "Where is the man who said this?" "I do not know." "When did you last see him?" "Many years ago." "Do you think he remembers?" The traveler looked at the stone. "Perhaps not." "Then who has been speaking the words all these years?" The traveler did not answer. The question felt unfair. The older man had caused the wound. Why should the traveler now be blamed for carrying it? The monk seemed to understand. He said, "I am not saying the words did not hurt you. They changed my life. Yes, they made me doubt myself. Yes, they made me leave my village. Yes." The monk pointed toward the stone. "But the first wound was his action. The daily wound became your repetition." The traveler looked away. "This is not easy to hear. We want healing without responsibility. We want to say, they put this pain inside me, so they must remove it. But the person who caused the wound may never return. They may never understand. They may deny what happened. They may already be gone. Then the question becomes difficult. Will we continue giving them power because they once misused it?" The traveler said, "You make it sound as if I chose this." "Not at first," the monk replied, "but what began without your permission has continued with your attention." The traveler felt anger rise. "Should I simply forget?" "No." "Should I forgive him?" "That may come later, or it may not. First, see clearly what you are doing to yourself." The monk picked up the small piece of wood the carpenter had given him. "Why do you carry this?" The carpenter said something broken can still become part of another journey. "And what journey do you want?" The traveler almost answered quickly. Then he stopped. He had spent so long trying to prove the insult wrong that he no longer knew what he truly wanted. He wanted success because failure would agree with the old man. He wanted praise because silence felt like judgment. He wanted to be remembered because the insult said he would not be. But beneath all of that, what did he want? He did not know. The monk said, "A life built only to answer an insult is still controlled by the person who spoke it." The traveler looked at him. The words entered slowly. He had believed he was fighting the past, but the past had been choosing his direction. Every road, every risk, every goal, every disappointment. The old sentence had become a hidden master. Buddhist teaching speaks about right intention. Before an action, there is often a purpose beneath it. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we do not. Two people may do the same thing for very different reasons. One may work hard from care, another may work hard from fear. One may travel from curiosity, another may travel because staying still brings old pain. The action may look brave, the intention may still be wounded. The monk asked, "What happens in your body when you repeat the sentence?" The traveler closed his eyes. His chest tightened. His jaw became hard, his stomach pulled inward. He had never noticed how quickly the body remembered. The insult was old, but each repetition made it new. This is how the mind keeps suffering alive. It brings yesterday into today. Then the body responds, as if the moment is happening again. The crowd returns. The shame returns. The helplessness returns. The past cannot enter the present by itself. It enters through memory, attention, and belief. The traveler said, "But what if the words were true?" The monk asked, "Were they?" "I do not know." "Can one angry person decide the value of your whole life?" "No." "Then why have you allowed his sentence to become a prophecy?" The traveler touched the stone. He had carried it so long that putting it down felt dangerous. Without the insult, who would he be? Without the need to prove something, what would move him? Pain can become an identity. We say, "This is what happened to me." Then slowly, without noticing, we begin saying, "This is who I am." The wound becomes familiar. Familiar does not mean peaceful. It only means known. Letting go can feel like losing part of ourselves, even when that part has been hurting us. The monk placed the stone in the traveler's palm. "Say the words again." The traveler repeated them. "You will never become anything worth remembering." The monk asked, "Whose voice is that?" "The man's." "Listen again." The traveler repeated the sentence. This time he heard something different. The voice sounded like his own. Not exactly, but close enough. For years he had become the speaker. The monk said, "You cannot stop the first man from having spoken, but you can decide whether his voice continues using your mouth." The traveler's eyes filled. He had never thought of silence as freedom. He had always believed he needed a new sentence, a stronger sentence, one that said he was important. He had searched for praise to cover the insult, but praise did not remove it. The monk said, "Do not replace one chain with another." "What do you mean?" "If you need everyone to call you worthy, you are still trapped inside words." The merchant understood this. He had once needed praise from strangers. The traveler looked toward him. The merchant nodded. The monk continued, "You do not need to prove the insult false every day. Let it become what it really is." "What is it?" "One person's anger from long ago." The traveler breathed slowly. The sentence became smaller. Not harmless, not forgotten, but smaller. He looked at the stone. Then he walked beyond the shelter to the edge of a shallow stream. For years he had imagined returning to the man who insulted him. He had imagined throwing the stone at his feet. He had imagined being admired, vindicated, finally free. None of those scenes had happened. Now he understood that freedom did not require an audience. He opened his hand. The stone fell into the water. There was a small sound. Then the current moved over it. The traveler waited for something great to happen. Nothing did. The sky did not change. The old memory did not disappear. But the weight around his neck was gone. Sometimes letting go is quiet. No one apologizes. No one sees it. No one gives us permission. The hand simply opens. The traveler kept the empty pouch, not as a home for the stone, as a reminder that space can remain after a burden leaves. The next morning, he joined the monk on the road. They traveled toward the mountains. The path grew narrow. The air became cooler. After several days, they reached a village built along a high green valley. Before they entered, they heard shouting. Two brothers stood in a field. A line had been cut through the soil between them. Each claimed the larger half. Their father had died and left them the land. Now the inheritance meant more to them than the bond between them. The traveler touched the empty pouch. He knew how one old wound could grow when carried too long. The monk looked at the divided field. One brother held a measuring rope. The other held a wooden staff. Neither was willing to step back. The traveler had just put down the words of the past. Now they had arrived among two men who were willing to lose each other over a piece of earth. The traveler reached the mountain village with the monk and the others. He had just put down an insult he carried for years. Now they found two brothers carrying a field between them like a weapon. Their father had died at the end of winter. He left behind a house, a few animals, and one wide piece of land. The brothers had worked on that land since childhood. They planted beside each other. They harvested beside each other. They had shared food, tools, and tired evenings. But after their father died, the land no longer felt shared. It became something to divide. The older brother said, "I cared for our father during his final years. I deserve more." The younger brother said, "I worked the field while you stayed near the house. I deserve more." The older brother said the northern side was better because the soil was deeper. The younger brother said the eastern side was better because it received more water. They measured the field again and again. They argued over trees. They argued over stones. They argued over a narrow path that crossed the middle. Each brother believed peace would come when he received the larger share. But the more they measured, the less peace remained. We recognize this. Sometimes we believe a problem is about land, or money, or a house, or an object left behind after someone dies. But beneath the object is often something else, a need to feel seen, a need to feel loved, a need to prove that our sacrifice mattered, a need to believe we were not forgotten. The land became the place where all their old pain gathered. The older brother remembered every time his father trusted the younger one more. The younger brother remembered every time the older one was praised first. Small hurts from childhood returned. Words spoken many years before became fresh again. The field was not only land anymore, it had become evidence. Each brother wanted the larger piece to prove that he had been the better son. The monk stood near the line they had cut through the soil. He watched them argue. The farmer looked at the dry earth. The woman watched the brothers refuse to listen. The merchant noticed how each man wanted the villagers to support him. The young man saw how both were planning a future without each other. Everyone recognized something. The older brother pointed at the monk. "You are a holy man. Tell him I deserve the northern side." The younger brother said, "Do not listen to him. He has always taken more." The monk asked, "Who owns the field now?" "We do," both brothers answered. "Who owned it before?" "Our father." "And before him?" "Our grandfather." "And before your grandfather?" The brothers became quiet. The monk looked at the soil beneath his feet. "The field has held many names," he said. "It has outlived all of them." The older brother frowned. "That does not solve anything." "No," the monk said, "but it may help you see what you're trying to control." The younger brother crossed his arms. "We only want a fair division." "Then why are you speaking about childhood?" They looked at each other. The monk continued, "You began by measuring land. Now you are measuring love." The words reached them. The older brother said, "Our father depended on me." The younger brother replied, "He trusted me with the crops." "There," said the monk, "the argument is not only about soil." The brothers looked away. The monk asked them to walk the whole field without speaking. At first they refused. Then the villagers gathered. Pride made it difficult to stop. At last they agreed. They walked beside the monk. Near the northern edge stood an old fig tree. The older brother remembered climbing it as a boy. The younger brother remembered falling from one branch and being carried home on his brother's back. Near the river path, they saw a flat stone where their father used to sit at midday. They remembered sharing water there. At the southern end, they passed the place where their mother had once planted flowers. She had died many years earlier. The brothers slowed down. Memory changed the field. It was no longer only something to divide. It was a place where their lives had grown together. The monk said, "You are cutting a line through more than land." The older brother looked at the marks in the soil. The younger brother looked at the old fig tree. Buddhist teaching warns us about greed. Greed is not only the desire for great wealth, it can be the need to receive slightly more. One more room, one more coin, one more piece of respect, one more sign that we mattered most. The amount may be small, the hunger beneath it may be endless. Greed tells us that peace is waiting inside possession. It says, "Once this becomes mine, I will rest." But when possession is built on fear, rest does not come. We begin protecting what we gained, comparing it, counting it, watching what the other person has. The brothers were not fighting because they loved the field too much. They were fighting because they were afraid of receiving less. Less land felt like less value. Less inheritance felt like less love from their dead father. The monk stopped at the center. He placed the measuring rope on the ground. "Suppose one of you receives one extra row of soil," he said. "What will it give you?" The older brother answered, "More crops." "How many more?" He did not know. The younger brother said, "That is not the point." "What is the point?" "Fairness." The monk asked, "Can a rope measure fairness?" Neither answered. The monk continued, "A rope can measure distance. It cannot measure years of care. It cannot measure pain. It cannot measure who loved more." The younger brother said, "Then how can we divide it?" "First, stop asking the land to answer questions it cannot answer." The brothers became still. They had wanted the inheritance to tell them who had mattered more, but their father was gone. The field could not speak for him. No larger piece could repair old wounds. No boundary could prove love. The older brother said, "If I step back, he will think I am weak." The younger brother said, "If I accept less, everyone will think he won." The monk looked at both of them. "You are willing to lose a brother to avoid appearing defeated." The field became quiet. This is how pride works. It makes us protect an image while destroying something real. We hold our position. We refuse the first apology. We keep the larger share. We win the argument. Then we return home alone. The monk asked, "What did your father want this land to become?" The younger brother answered, "He wanted us to keep farming." Together, the older brother looked down. "Yes." "Then your inheritance was not only the land." The brothers understood. Their father had left them work, food, memory, and each other. But because they focused only on ownership, they nearly destroyed the part no document could restore. The monk sat beneath the fig tree. He told them to return the next morning with no ropes. That night, neither brother slept well. The older one walked through the house and found his father's worn sandals. The younger one sat near the field and remembered the day his brother protected him from a wild dog. Anger began to loosen, not because the problem disappeared, because memory became wider than the argument. The next morning they returned. The older brother said, "Take the eastern side." The younger brother shook his head. "No, you should take it." They almost began arguing again. The monk raised one hand. "Do not turn generosity into another contest." They laughed for the first time in months. The sound surprised them. They decided to keep one part of the field shared. The fig tree, the river path, and the stone where their father rested would belong to both. The remaining land would be divided by use, not pride. The older brother would care for the deeper soil. The younger one would manage the side near the water. They would share tools and help during harvest. The division was not perfectly equal, but it was honest. More importantly, it did not require one brother to become smaller. This is the middle way. Not always an exact half. Not always one person winning. A wise solution responds to real conditions. It protects what matters most. The brothers filled the cut line in the soil. They used their feet to push the earth back together. The field still had boundaries, but their hearts no longer did. Letting go did not mean giving away everything. It meant releasing the need to control what the land could never decide, who had been loved more, who had suffered more, who deserved to win. After the harvest, the older brother began feeling weak. At first he ignored it. His joints hurt. His appetite changed. Some mornings his breath felt heavy. Fear entered him quickly. He visited a healer in a nearby village. The healer was known for his knowledge of herbs, but people also said he feared illness more than anyone. He checked his own body each morning. He treated every pain as a warning. He believed enough caution could protect him from sickness and death. The older brother prepared for the journey. The younger brother offered to go with him. This time the offer carried no hidden contest. They walked together for part of the road. Then the older brother continued toward the healer's house. Behind him, the field remained quiet. Ahead, another person was trying to control what no human body can promise to avoid. The older brother left the divided field and went to see the healer. He had learned that land could not decide who was loved more. Now he was about to meet a man who wanted the body to promise it would never fail. The healer lived near the edge of the next village. People came to him with fever, pain, weak joints, stomach sickness, and wounds that would not close. He knew many herbs. He knew which leaves could calm the body. He knew which roots could reduce pain. He knew when rest was needed and when a person should be sent to a better physician. People trusted him because he was careful, but there was something they did not know. The healer feared illness more than any of his patients. Each morning, he checked his eyes in a mirror. He touched his neck. He listened to his breathing. He studied every mark on his skin. If his head hurt, he thought of dangerous sickness. If his stomach felt strange, he imagined the worst. If he became tired, he believed his body was beginning to fail. His knowledge had helped many people. But inside his own mind, knowledge became fear. He knew too many things that could go wrong. We recognize this. Sometimes knowledge brings peace. Sometimes fear uses knowledge to build a larger prison. The mind says, if I understand every danger, I can prevent it. Then every small feeling becomes a warning. Every ache becomes a future. Every change becomes a threat. The healer believed that because he knew the body well, he should be able to control it. He ate carefully. He slept at the same time each night. He avoided cold rain. He cleaned everything twice. He refused food prepared by strangers. He did all this not only from wisdom, he did it from terror. Then one morning, he became ill. It began with weakness. His hands shook while preparing herbs. By midday, he had a fever. At night, his body ached. The healer tried one remedy, then another, then another. When the fever remained, panic entered him. "This should be working," he said. His assistant asked him to rest. "I cannot rest. I need to know what this is." He checked his body again and again. He counted his breaths. He watched the color of his skin. He asked everyone whether he looked worse. The more frightened he became, the more every feeling grew. He could not tell what belonged to the illness and what belonged to fear. The older brother reached the house that afternoon. He found the healer lying on a mat surrounded by bowls, roots, cloth, and small bottles. "You are ill," the brother said. "I know." "Then perhaps I should return later." "No, tell me your symptoms." The brother explained his weakness and pain. The healer listened, but his attention kept returning to his own body. He touched his forehead. He checked his pulse. He asked, "Do I seem pale to you?" The brother did not know what to say. The man who had come seeking help now felt he needed to help the healer. A Buddhist nun lived at a small temple nearby. When she heard the healer was sick, she came to visit. She was known for sitting beside people others avoided, the dying, the grieving, the frightened. She entered the room and looked around. "You have enough herbs here for 10 patients," she said. "I may need them." "Do you know what illness you have?" "Not yet." "Then why have you taken so many remedies?" "Because I cannot wait." The nun sat beside him. "What are you waiting for?" "Certainty." The room became quiet. The healer looked at her. "I need to know what will happen." "No one can give you that." "I am a healer." "Yes, I understand the body. You understand many things about it." "Then I should know whether I will recover." The nun shook her head. "Knowledge can guide care. It cannot command the result." The healer became angry. "That is easy for you to say." "No," she replied. "It is difficult for everyone." He turned away. The nun picked up one of the bowls. "Is this medicine useful?" "Yes." "Can it support healing?" "Yes." "Can it promise healing?" The healer did not answer. She placed the bowl down. "This is where your suffering has entered, not only through sickness, through the demand that care must give you certainty." The healer closed his eyes. For years, he had told patients to rest, to breathe, to take one day at a time, to follow the treatment and observe the body. Now that the sick body was his own, every lesson disappeared. This happens often. Wisdom is easy when pain belongs to someone else. We can see clearly from a distance, but when fear enters our own chest, even simple truths become difficult to hold. The healer said, "What if this becomes worse?" "It may." "What if the herbs fail?" "They may." "What if I do not recover?" The nun looked at him with kindness. "That is possible too." He opened his eyes. He wanted comfort. She gave him truth. Buddhist teaching does not promise that the body will remain safe. The body is born into change. It grows, it becomes strong, it becomes tired, it becomes sick, it heals, it becomes sick again. One day it ends. This is not punishment. It is the nature of a body. The frightened mind hears this and says, "Then I must protect myself from every change." But the body cannot be made permanent. Even perfect care cannot create a perfect promise. The nun said, "You have spent your life caring for the body as if care could defeat impermanence." The healer whispered, "Then why care at all?" "Because suffering can be reduced." "Even if it cannot be removed?" "Yes." "Even if the ending is unknown?" "Yes." This is the middle way. We do not ignore the body. We do not refuse medicine. We do not pretend illness is nothing. We care carefully, but we stop asking care to do what it cannot do. We stop demanding certainty. The nun opened the window. Cool air entered. The healer said, "Close it. The air may make me worse, or it may help you breathe. You do not know." "Exactly." He almost laughed. For the first time, he heard his own fear clearly. Everything had become dangerous because nothing could be guaranteed. The nun asked his assistant to remove most of the bowls. She kept only what was necessary. She told the healer to drink water, to rest, to eat when he could, to let the body use its strength. Then she said, "For the next hour, do not check yourself. That is impossible." "It is possible. What if something changes?" "Something is always changing." The healer lay still. At first he noticed every sensation, a small pain in his side, warmth in his face, a quick breath. His mind gave each feeling a story. This pain means danger. This warmth means the fever is rising. This breath means weakness. The nun said, "Feel what is present before naming what it will become." The healer tried. Pain, warmth, breathing, nothing more. The mind wanted to turn each moment into tomorrow. He kept returning to now. This is mindfulness, not pretending the body feels good, not forcing fear away, simply meeting what is here before fear builds a whole future around it. The fever remained that night, but the healer rested. The next morning, it was slightly lower. He wanted to say, "I am recovering." The nun stopped him. "You are improving today. What is the difference? Recovery is a story about the future. Improvement is what is true now." He understood. The next day the fever rose again. Fear returned. But he did not take every herb in the room. He did not ask everyone for reassurance. He followed the care that made sense. Then he waited. Waiting had once felt like helplessness. Now it became practice. The older brother stayed nearby. He also learned something. His own pain needed attention, but it did not need endless fear. The healer examined him when he had enough strength. He advised rest, better food, and further care if the weakness continued. He did not pretend to know everything. For the first time, saying "I do not know" did not feel like failure. Days passed. The healer slowly became stronger. He walked outside. He sat beneath a tree. He noticed how good the sun felt without asking whether it would remain. He ate without studying every feeling in his stomach. He slept without placing medicine beside both hands. The body had not become certain. His relationship with it had changed. He now understood that health is not control. Health is care inside uncertainty. A person can do everything wisely and still become ill. A person can become ill and still meet the moment with courage. The nun said, "Your knowledge will be kinder now." The healer asked, "Why?" "Because you know what fear feels like from inside the bed." He began seeing patients again. He listened differently. When someone asked, "Will I be fine?" he no longer answered too quickly. He said, "We will care for what is here. We will watch carefully. We will not suffer from every possible tomorrow before it arrives." One evening, a man wearing an old soldier's coat came to the house. He had no wound on his body. Still, he looked exhausted. He sat near the door and kept his eyes on the ground. The healer asked, "Where does it hurt?" The soldier touched his chest. "Here, but no herb reaches it." The nun looked at him. "What happened?" The soldier said, "Years ago I made a decision. People suffered because of it. I've tried to punish myself every day since." The healer knew something about fear repeating the same pain. The traveler knew something about carrying the past. The nun moved closer. The body could not promise to remain well. The past could not promise to become different. Now another man had arrived, trying to control what had already happened. And so the next story began with a soldier who wanted to return to a moment that would never open again. The healer had learned that fear could not make the body certain. Then a soldier came carrying a pain no medicine could reach. The soldier sat near the door. His coat was old. His boots were worn. His face looked older than his years. He had no fresh wound. Still, he moved like a man who had been injured every day for a long time. The nun sat beside him. The healer remained quiet. The soldier kept his eyes on the floor. At last, he said, "I made a choice many years ago." The nun waited. People suffered because of it. What happened? The soldier took a slow breath. During a battle, he had been ordered to lead a small group of men through a narrow valley. He knew another road. It was longer, but safer. The officer above him demanded speed. The soldier obeyed. He told the men to enter the valley. An attack came from the hills. Several men did not return. The soldier survived. For years he had repeated the same question. What if I had refused? What if I had chosen the other road? What if I had spoken more strongly? What if I had noticed the danger sooner? The questions followed him everywhere. At night he returned to the valley. In the morning he woke with the same guilt. He believed that if he suffered enough, the past might somehow become balanced. He ate little. He avoided laughter. He refused comfort. When kind people spoke to him, he pulled away. He believed peace would be an insult to those who had died. We recognize this. Sometimes regret begins as a clear voice. It tells us we did something wrong. It asks us to learn, to repair what can be repaired, to become more careful. But regret can change. It can become punishment. Then the mind says, If I continue hurting, perhaps I can prove that I am not a bad person, or if I refuse happiness, perhaps the past will forgive me. But pain cannot travel backward. No amount of suffering today can enter yesterday and change one decision. The soldier said, I should have known. The nun asked, Did you know? I had doubts. Did you know an attack would come? No. Did you understand everything you understand now? No. Then why are you judging the man you were with the knowledge you gained afterward? The soldier looked up. Because people died. Yes. And I led them there. Yes. The nun did not remove the truth. Compassion is not pretending that actions have no results. Buddhist teaching speaks clearly about karma. Choices matter, intentions matter, actions create consequences. But karma is not a command to hate ourselves forever. It is a teaching about responsibility. Responsibility looks forward. Self-punishment keeps looking backward. The soldier said, You want me to forgive myself. I want you to see clearly. I do see clearly. No, you see only one moment. The soldier frowned. The nun continued. You see the valley. You see the order. You see the men entering. You see the attack. You do not see the frightened soldier trying to obey. You do not see the pressure. You do not see what you knew and what you did not know. You do not see the years you have spent refusing to live. Why should those years matter? Because your life is also part of the consequence. The soldier became quiet. For years he had believed his suffering was a form of loyalty. He thought guilt kept the dead close. If he released it, he feared he would forget them. The nun asked, Do you remember their names? All of them. Do you remember how they laughed? Yes. What they spoke about? Yes. What they hoped to do after the war? The soldier's face changed. One wanted to return to his wife. Another wanted to open a shop. One had a child he had never met. The soldier had tried not to think about these things. The moment of death had swallowed the rest of their lives. His guilt had reduced each man to the way he was lost. The nun said, You are carrying their deaths. Are you carrying what they loved? The soldier looked at her. He had no answer. This is what guilt can do. It tells us that endless pain is the deepest form of remembrance, but sometimes pain makes memory smaller. It turns a whole person into one terrible ending. The nun said, If you wish to honor them, remember more than the valley. The soldier's eyes filled. What else can I do? What can still be repaired? Nothing. Nothing at all. They are gone. Yes, but are there families? The soldier nodded. Are there young soldiers who may face the kind of choice you faced? Yes. Are there people who can learn from what happened? Yes. Then regret still has work to do. The soldier looked at her carefully. The nun explained. Regret can become wisdom. It can make your next action more honest. It can make you speak when fear once made you silent. It can make you protect someone from repeating your mistake. And if I do all that, will the past change? No. The answer hurt, but it was clean. The soldier had spent years bargaining with the impossible. Some part of him believed that enough pain might reopen the valley. He might choose again. He might save them. But the past was closed, not cruelly, simply completely. This is one of the hardest things to accept. We can revisit a memory. We can understand it differently. We can learn from it, but we cannot enter it. The nun said, You are trying to use today as a punishment for yesterday. What should I use it for? For the good that is still possible. The soldier looked at his hands. They had carried weapons. They had also carried wounded men. They had written letters to families. They had buried friends. They were not innocent hands. They were not useless hands either. Buddhist wisdom does not divide people into completely good or completely bad. Human beings are more complicated. We act from fear, confusion, care, anger, duty, and ignorance, sometimes all in the same moment. The path is not to build a perfect image of ourselves. The path is to become more awake, to see harm, to admit it, to repair what we can, to refuse to repeat it. The soldier said, "I do not deserve peace." The nun asked, "Who does your suffering help?" He was silent. "Does it feed the families?" "No." "Does it protect anyone?" "No." "Does it bring the dead back?" "No." Then perhaps peace is not a reward. Perhaps it is the ground from which you can finally become useful. The soldier had never thought of peace that way. He had treated peace like forgiveness given by a judge, something he had to deserve. The nun described another kind, a peace that did not deny the past, a peace that made honest action possible. A restless mind can repeat guilt for years. A steady mind can turn one painful lesson into compassion. The soldier stayed at the temple for several weeks. Each morning he sat with the nun. At first, the same scene returned. The valley, the order, the attack, the faces. He did not run from it, but he stopped changing the ending in his imagination. He stopped saying, "This time I will choose differently." Instead, he said, "This happened." The words felt harsh. Then they felt real. The nun taught him to breathe with the memory, not to push it away, not to climb inside it, to let it arise, to let it pass. A memory is not the event itself. It is an event arising now in the mind. This difference matters. The past does not return in full. The mind creates an image. Then the body suffers, as if the valley is opening again. Mindfulness does not erase memory. It helps us see the memory as memory. One morning, the soldier wrote down the names of the men. Beside each name, he wrote something about how that person had lived. One sang badly, one shared food, one told long stories, one feared snakes, one prayed every night. The soldier cried as he wrote, but the grief felt different from guilt. Guilt had trapped him inside himself. Grief opened him toward them. He began visiting some of the families. He did not ask them to remove his pain. He did not demand forgiveness. He listened. He carried messages. He helped repair a roof. He brought food to one widow. He told one child about the father he had never known. Some families welcomed him. One refused to see him. He accepted this. He could choose honesty. He could not control how others received it. Later, he began speaking with young soldiers. He told them that obedience did not remove responsibility. He taught them to question clearly when they saw danger. He could not change the choice he had made, but he could help another person make a wiser one. This is how regret becomes practice, not by disappearing, by changing direction. The soldier still had difficult nights. Healing did not make him forget. Sometimes the old thought returned, "You should suffer." When it did, he asked a new question. What good can be done now? One afternoon, while carrying food to a nearby home, he heard someone crying behind a closed door. He knocked. A father opened it. The man looked exhausted. Inside, the room had been left exactly as it was on the day his daughter died. Her clothes remained folded. Her cup stood near the window. Her blanket had not been moved. The father would not allow anyone to touch anything. He believed changing the room would mean losing her again. The soldier understood the wish to live inside one moment. He had done the same for years. He stood at the doorway holding the basket. The nun's lesson returned to him. The past could guide love. It could not become a place to live forever. The soldier entered quietly. He had learned that punishing himself could not rewrite what happened. Now he would sit beside a father who believed holding everything still could stop someone from being gone. The soldier entered the quiet house. He had learned that suffering could not rewrite the past. Now he met a father who was trying to keep the past from moving at all. The room belonged to the father's daughter. She had died 2 years earlier. Since that day, nothing inside had changed. Her blanket remained folded at the end of the bed. Her sandals stood near the wall. A cup rested beside the window. Her wooden comb was still on the table. Even the small flowers she once kept in a clay pot had dried where she left them. The father cleaned around everything, but he moved nothing. He would not allow anyone else to enter. He said the room had to remain exactly as it was. "If I change it," he told the soldier, "then she will truly be gone." The soldier understood this. He had lived for years inside one moment in a valley. The father lived inside this room, different place, the same refusal to let time move forward. The soldier placed the food basket near the door. The father barely looked at it. He sat on the floor beside the bed. He held one of his daughter's old scarves. "She used to wear this in the cold season," he said. The soldier nodded. The father continued, "She hated mornings." A weak smile appeared. "She would hide under this blanket and pretend she could not hear me." Then the smile disappeared. The room became heavy again. We recognize this. When someone dies, the world changes too quickly. Their voice is gone. Their footsteps stop. Their place at the table becomes empty. But the heart does not understand at the same speed. Part of us waits for the door to open. Part of us listens for a familiar sound. Part of us believes that if we keep everything unchanged, the person may still know how to find their way home. The father touched the scarf. "People keep telling me to empty the room." The soldier said, "Do you want to?" "No." "Then do not do it because they demand it." The father looked at him. "You agree with me?" "I agree that grief cannot be forced." The father relaxed slightly. Then the soldier added, "But I do not know if this room is helping you remember her or keeping you from living." The father's face hardened. "You do not understand." The soldier sat near the doorway. "No, not exactly. My daughter was all I had." The soldier listened. "She became ill during the rainy season. At first we thought it would pass. Then she became weaker. I kept telling her she would recover." The father looked at the bed. "I promised her." The soldier asked, "Did she ask you to promise?" "No." "Why did you?" "Because I was afraid." The father lowered his head. "I thought if I said it strongly enough, life would obey." The soldier knew this feeling. The healer had tried to make the body promise recovery. The father had tried to make hope command the result. But the daughter died. Afterward, the father began protecting the room. He could not protect her body, so he protected her things. He could not stop death, so he tried to stop change. A few days later, the older monk came to the house. The soldier had asked him to visit. The father did not welcome him warmly. "I do not need teaching," he said. The monk replied, "Good, I did not bring any." "Then why are you here?" "To sit." The father looked confused, but he allowed him inside. The monk sat near the window. Dust covered the wooden frame. The room smelled closed. The father sat beside the bed. For a long time, neither spoke. At last, the monk asked, "What was your daughter's name?" The father answered softly, "Mira." "What did Mira love?" The father looked surprised. Most people asked how she died. Few asked how she lived. "She loved birds," he said. "What kind?" "All of them, even noisy ones." The monk smiled. "What else?" "She liked sweet rice. She sang while sweeping. She always gave away the best fruit and kept the bruised ones for herself." The father began telling stories. He spoke about the day Mira fell into a shallow pond. He spoke about how she once tried to hide a wounded bird under her blanket. He spoke about her laughter. The room changed as he spoke. It was still sad, but it was no longer only the room where someone had died. It became the room where someone had lived. The monk said, "You remember much." "I remember everything. Then why do you believe her life is held only inside these objects? The father looked around. These are what remain. Are they? The monk pointed toward his chest. What happens there when you speak her name? The father placed a hand over his heart. Pain, warmth, love, all of it was there. The monk said, forms change. Love does not have to disappear with them. The father frowned. If I remove her things, I will lose more. You may feel another wave of grief. Then why would I do it? Not to erase her, to let your love move. The father did not understand. The monk lifted the wooden comb. Did Mira love this comb? She used it every morning. Would she want it to remain untouched forever? The father almost answered yes. Then he remembered how careless she had been with her things. She often forgot where she placed them. She lent clothes to neighbors. She gave away food. She did not live like someone who wanted objects protected forever. The monk said, "You are not keeping the room as she kept it." The father looked at him. "You are keeping it as fear keeps it." The words hurt. The father became angry. "This room is the only place where she still feels close." The monk nodded. "Then sit here when you need to." "I do. But do you ever leave?" The father was silent. He had stopped visiting friends. He no longer worked in the garden. He avoided children because their laughter hurt. He refused invitations. He ate alone. The room had become a shelter. Then it became a cage. This is how grief can hold us. At first we need stillness. We need familiar things. We need a place where the loss can be felt. But sometimes the place of mourning becomes the whole world. We begin believing that moving forward means leaving the person behind. The monk said, "Love and movement can exist together." The father asked, "How?" "By carrying what is alive, not only protecting what is gone." The monk pointed toward the dried flowers. "Did Mira love flowers?" "Yes." "Then plant new ones." The father shook his head. "They would not be hers." "No, they would be yours, grown from what she taught you to love." The father looked at the dry stems. Buddhist teaching speaks about impermanence. But impermanence is not only loss, it is also continuation through change. A seed does not remain a seed. A child does not remain a child. A body does not remain strong. A relationship does not remain in one form. When form changes, the mind says, everything is gone. But often something continues in another way. A person's kindness continues in the people they helped. Their words continue in choices we make. Their love continues in the way we care for others. The father had been guarding the form, the bed, the scarf, the cup, the comb. He had forgotten the movement of Mira's life. She had given things away. She had cared for birds. She had shared food. Her love had always moved outward. Now his grief had closed every window. The monk asked, "When did you last open this room?" "I open the door every day." "The window?" The father looked toward it. "Not since she died." "Why?" "I do not want the wind to disturb anything." The monk said nothing. The father looked at the dust on the frame. The room had remained still for 2 years, but stillness had not brought Mira back. It had only kept the father breathing the same old air. The monk said, "You do not have to empty the room today." The father looked relieved. "Then what should I do?" "Open one window. That is all. That is enough for now." The father stood. His legs felt weak. He walked toward the window. His hand stopped above the wooden latch. A simple movement felt enormous. If he opened it, the curtain would move. Dust would rise. Things might shift. Reality would enter. The father began to cry. The monk stood near him. "You are not opening the window against her," he said. "You are opening it with the love that remains." The father lifted the latch. The window opened. Wind entered. The curtain moved for the first time in 2 years. Dust rose into the sunlight. The room looked different, not destroyed, alive. The father stood there breathing. He expected guilt. It came. Then grief. Then something else. Fresh air. He closed his eyes. For one moment, he remembered Mira laughing in the wind. Not sick, not dying, running. The form had changed. The love had not. Over the next weeks, the father began slowly. He washed the cup. He folded the scarf and placed it in a wooden box. He gave some of Mira's clothes to a family nearby. He kept the comb. He was not trying to prove that he had healed. He was simply allowing the room to breathe. Then he planted new flowers outside the window. He began feeding birds in the morning. Children returned to his yard. Some days grief came without warning. He did not fight it. He sat. He cried. Then he continued. This is letting go, not throwing away love, not becoming untouched, not forgetting. It is learning that memory does not need a locked room to survive. One afternoon, the father found a small piece of paper among Mira's things. On it, she had written a few simple words. Do not keep good things only for yourself. The father smiled through tears. He placed the paper near the open window. A sudden wind entered. The paper lifted. It crossed the room. The father reached for it, then stopped. The paper moved through the window and into the street. He watched it turn through the air. For once, he did not try to catch what was leaving. The wind carried the message beyond the house, across the road, past the garden, toward the home of a widow who lived alone. She found the paper near her doorway. She picked it up and read the words, "Do not keep good things only for yourself." The widow held the message for a long time. She had been writing letters to her dead husband for years, letters filled with questions no one could answer. Now, one small piece of paper had arrived without being asked for, and so the next story began with a woman still waiting for a reply from someone who could no longer send one. The wind carried Mira's message to the widow's door. The father had learned that love could remain even when a room changed. Now the widow had to learn that some questions remain unanswered, no matter how long the heart keeps asking. She lived alone in a narrow house near the end of the village. Each week she wrote a letter to her husband. He had been dead for 6 years. Still, she wrote. At first, the letters were short. I miss you. The roof is leaking again. The mango tree finally gave fruit. Then the questions began. Why did you leave so soon? Did you know how ill you were? Were you afraid? Could I have done more? Did you hear me speaking beside your bed? Where are you now? She folded every letter carefully. She placed them inside a wooden box. The box became full, so she found another, then another. The letters filled a whole shelf. She never sent them anywhere. There was nowhere to send them. But each week she sat beside the window and wrote as if an answer might arrive. We recognize this. When someone leaves through death, the questions often remain. The conversation ends before the heart is finished. There are things we wanted to ask, things we wanted to explain, things we wanted to hear one more time. The mind returns to the final days. It searches every word, every look, every silence. It believes there must be an answer hidden somewhere. If it thinks long enough, perhaps the past will explain itself. The widow believed her letters kept her close to her husband. In some ways, they did. She remembered his voice while writing. She remembered how he sat near the fire. She remembered the way he folded his sleeves before work. But the letters also kept her waiting. Every question carried a hidden demand. Answer me. Tell me why. Tell me what I should have done. Tell me that I am forgiven. Her husband remained silent. The silence became another wound. One morning, the Buddhist nun came to visit. She had heard about the widow from the father who opened his daughter's room. The widow welcomed her with tea. Then she saw the nun looking at the boxes. "They are only letters," she said. "To whom?" "My husband." "Does writing help?" "Yes." The answer came quickly. The nun waited. The widow looked toward the shelf. "Sometimes." "What happens after you finish?" "I feel close to him." "And after that?" The widow held her cup more tightly. "I wait." "For what?" The widow looked down. "I do not know." But she did know. She waited for something impossible, a sign, a dream, a voice, a feeling that would answer every question. She had heard stories of people seeing lost loved ones in sleep. She had heard of birds appearing at meaningful moments. She had heard of lamps moving without wind. Whenever anything unusual happened, she wondered if it was him. Whenever nothing happened, she felt abandoned again. The nun asked, "Do you believe he is choosing not to answer?" "No." "Then why does the silence feel like rejection?" The widow's eyes filled. "Because grief does not always listen to reason. The mind knows a person is gone. The heart still feels ignored." The widow said, "He always answered me when he was alive, and now the form of the relationship has changed. I do not want it to change. I know." The widow looked at the boxes. "What should I do? Stop writing?" "Not yet." This widow was surprised. She expected the nun to tell her to burn the letters, to move on, to accept reality. But Buddhist compassion does not force the heart to release before it is ready. The nun said, "Write another letter." The widow brought paper. She dipped her brush in ink. "What should I write?" "The question that hurts most." The widow remained still for a long time. Then she wrote, "Was I enough for you?" Her hand began shaking. The nun read the words. "Why this question?" The widow looked toward the floor. Her husband had worked hard. He often came home tired. During his final illness, he became quiet. Sometimes he turned away from her. Sometimes he refused food. Sometimes he seemed far away even while she sat beside him. After he died, she wondered whether he had been unhappy, whether he regretted their life, whether she had failed him. For 6 years, every other question had grown around this one. "Was I enough?" The nun said. "Can he answer this now?" "No." "Then what have you done with the question?" "I keep asking it." "Does asking make the answer more possible?" The widow shook her head. "Then why continue?" "Because I need to know." The nun looked at her gently. "Some answers cannot be received. They must be released." The widow did not like this. "It is easy to release a question when it does not belong to you." "Yes," the nun said. "That is why no one can release it for you." The widow stood and walked toward the shelf. She touched the first box. "These letters are all I have." "No," the nun replied. "They are what you have gathered around what you still have." "What do I still have?" "Memory, love, the life you shared, the ways he changed you, the care you gave, the care you received." The widow said, "But I do not know whether it was enough." The nun asked, "Enough for what?" The widow had no answer. Enough to prevent death, enough to remove all pain, enough to make every day perfect. No human love can do these things. Love can be sincere and still incomplete. People can care deeply and still misunderstand each other. A marriage can contain tenderness, anger, silence, comfort, and regret. The widow had been searching for one final judgment, a single answer that would declare the whole life good or bad. But human lives do not fit inside one sentence. The nun said, "Perhaps you were not perfect." "I know I was not." "Perhaps he was not either." "He was not." "Then why must the love be perfect to have been real?" The widow sat down. This question reached somewhere deep. She had treated uncertainty like proof of failure. Because she could not know exactly what he felt in his final days, she imagined the worst. The frightened mind often does this. When an answer is missing, fear fills the empty space. It says, "You were not loved. You should have done more." They left unhappy, but uncertainty is not evidence. It is simply uncertainty. Buddhist teaching asks us to see what is known and what is imagined. The widow knew that her husband had stayed beside her through many hard years. She knew he brought medicine when she was ill. She knew he laughed with her. She knew he trusted her with his fear. She knew he held her hand on the night before he died. These things were real. What he thought in every silent moment was unknown. She had turned the unknown into punishment. The nun said, "You cannot control what the past refuses to explain." The widow whispered, "Then how do I live with not knowing?" By letting the question be unanswered without letting it rule your life. The widow looked at the letter. "Was I enough for you?" The words seemed heavier than the paper. The nun asked her to read the letter aloud. She did. Then the nun said, "Now answer from what you know, not from what you fear." The widow thought for a long time. At last she said, "I loved him as well as I knew how." The nun nodded. Again, "I loved him as well as I knew how. Is that perfect? No. Is it true? Yes." The widow began to cry. For years, she had wanted her husband to release her from guilt. Now she understood that the work had become hers, not because the past no longer mattered, because the past could no longer speak. That evening, she wrote a different kind of letter. She did not ask where he was. She did not ask whether she had been enough. She wrote about the life they shared. She thanked him for the small things. She admitted where she had failed. She forgave what she could. Then she wrote, "I will stop asking you to answer what cannot be answered." The next week, she wrote again. But the letters changed. They became less like questions sent into silence. They became a way of remembering. Over time, she wrote less often, not because she loved him less, because love no longer needed to keep knocking on a closed door. One afternoon, the widow carried several old letters outside. She did not burn them. She read them once. Then she placed some beneath stones in the garden, where rain would slowly erase the ink. She kept a few. Letting go did not require destroying everything. It required changing her relationship with what remained. A strong wind rose while she was reading one final letter. The paper slipped from her hand. She reached for it, then stopped. The letter moved across the road. It turned once in the air and landed near a child sitting behind a wall. The boy picked it up. He read only the last line. "I cannot control another person's answer. I can only choose what I carry." The child held the paper tightly. Inside the house behind him, his parents were arguing. His older sisters were shouting. His grandmother was crying. The boy had spent months trying to keep everyone calm. He spoke softly. He hid bad news. He apologized for things he had not done. He believed it was his job to stop the family from breaking. The widow walked toward him. "You found my letter," she said. The child looked at the words again. "What does this mean?" The widow listened to the voices coming from the house. Then she looked at the boy's tired face. "It means some burdens feel like love, even when they were never ours to carry." The nun had taught the widow to release questions that could not be answered. Now, a child was trying to control the feelings of everyone he loved. And so the next story began with someone too young to understand that peace in a family cannot rest on one frightened heart. The widow looked at the child holding her letter. She had learned that not every question could be answered. Now the child had to learn that not every argument could be stopped by him. His name was Arun. He was only 10 years old, but he watched the people around him like someone much older. He noticed the smallest change in a voice. He knew when his father was becoming angry. He knew when his mother was trying not to cry. He knew when his sisters were about to argue. He knew when his grandmother became silent because the house was too heavy. Arun believed it was his duty to keep everyone happy, so he became very careful. He never asked for much. He ate whatever was given to him. He agreed with everyone. When his father was tired, Arun stayed away. When his mother was worried, he smiled so she would not worry about him too. When his sisters argued, he stood between them and begged them to stop. When someone blamed him for something he had not done, he apologized. He thought apologies were small prices to pay for peace. At night, Arun listened from his sleeping mat. His parents spoke in low, angry voices. He heard words about money, work, family duties, old disappointments. Sometimes the voices became loud. Arun would rise and enter the room. "I am sorry," he would say. The adults would stop and look at him. "What are you sorry for?" his mother once asked. Arun did not know, but the argument stopped for a moment. That was enough. He began believing that his sadness, silence, and obedience could hold the family together. We recognize this. Some children learn early that the room feels safer when they become smaller. They stop asking questions. They hide their needs. They study every face before speaking. People call them good children, quiet children, mature children, but sometimes their goodness is fear wearing a polite face. Arun did not want praise. He wanted the house to remain calm. He believed that if everyone was happy, no one would leave. No one would shout. No one would stop loving him. The widow sat beside him near the wall. She heard another angry voice from inside the house. Arun quickly stood. "I have to go." "Why?" "They are arguing." "Did you begin the argument?" "No." "Can you end it?" "I usually try." "Does it stay ended?" Arun looked down. "No." The widow understood. She had tried to receive answers from someone who could no longer speak. Arun was trying to create peace inside people who had not created peace within themselves. Both were waiting for something outside their control. The widow returned the letter to him. "Keep it," she said. Arun folded it carefully and placed it inside his shirt. Then he went inside. His parents were arguing about money. His father had promised to pay a debt. His mother had used part of the money for food. Each believed the other had acted wrongly. Arun stood between them. "Please stop." His father said, "Go to your room." His mother said, "This does not concern you." But everything in the house felt like it concerned him. He began to cry. At once, both parents became quiet. His mother held him. His father left the room. Arun thought he had succeeded, but the conflict had not disappeared. It had, only moved into silence. The next morning, his grandmother found him sitting outside. She was a small woman with slow steps and clear eyes. She had watched Arun becoming quieter over the years. She sat beside him. "Why did you cry last night?" she asked. "Because they were angry." "Were they angry with you?" "No." "Then why did you carry it?" Arun looked at her. "Someone has to stop them." His grandmother shook her head. "That someone cannot always be you. If I do nothing, it may become worse. And when you try, what happens? They stop." "For how long?" Arun remembered the many arguments. Some stopped for minutes, some returned the next day, some changed into cold silence that lasted for weeks. "Not long," he admitted. His grandmother took a clay cup and filled it with water. She held it out to him. "Keep the water still." Arun held the cup carefully. His grandmother touched the side. The water moved. "Keep it still," she repeated. Arun tightened his hands. She touched it again. The water moved again. "I cannot keep it still if you keep touching it," he said. His grandmother nodded. Then why do you believe you can keep every person calm while life keeps touching them? Arun looked into the cup. The water continued moving for a moment, then it settled by itself. His grandmother said, "Peace cannot always be forced. Sometimes people must learn to settle their own minds. But what if they do not? Then they must face the results of their anger. What if our family breaks?" His voice became small. Now the deepest fear had spoken. His grandmother placed an arm around him. "You believe that if you are quiet enough, kind enough, and useful enough, no one will leave." Arun began to cry. She did not tell him his fear was foolish. Children often understand more than adults think. He had seen a neighbor's father leave after many arguments. He had heard relatives threaten to move away. He knew families could change. He wanted to control everyone's feelings because he believed their feelings controlled his safety. His grandmother said, "You did not create the anger in this house." Arun wiped his eyes. "But I live inside it." "Yes. Then what can I do?" "You can speak truthfully. You can leave the room when shouting begins. You can ask for help. You can be kind without becoming invisible." Arun looked confused. "Is being quiet wrong?" "No. Silence can be wise, but silence born from fear slowly erases the person who is silent." She asked him what food he liked. Arun said, "Anything." "What game do you enjoy?" "Whatever my friends choose." "What do you want to learn?" He opened his mouth. No answer came. He had spent so much time studying what everyone else wanted that he had stopped knowing what he wanted. This is what happens when we try to control other people's emotions. We begin changing ourselves for every mood. If someone becomes angry, we become smaller. If someone becomes sad, we become cheerful. If someone becomes disappointed, we abandon our own choice. We call this love. But love that requires us to disappear is not peace. Buddhist teaching speaks about compassion. Compassion means caring about suffering. But compassion must include wisdom. Without wisdom, compassion can become fear. We rush to remove every uncomfortable feeling. We believe another person's anger is our failure. We believe their sadness is our duty. We believe their disappointment means we have done something wrong. But people have their own minds, their own habits, their own wounds, their own choices. We can offer kindness. We cannot command their inner world. Arun asked, "Should I stop caring?" His grandmother smiled. "No, care honestly." "What does that mean?" "Help where help is possible. Do not pretend you control what happens inside another heart." She pointed toward the house. "Your parents must learn how to speak to each other." "Can I teach them?" "No." "Can you?" "I can advise them. They must still choose." Arun did not like this. It felt safer to believe everything depended on him. That belief was heavy, but it gave him the feeling of power. Letting go meant accepting that adults could make choices he could not stop. His grandmother said, "You are a child. You are allowed to be one." The words felt strange. Arun had forgotten. That evening, another argument began. His first instinct was to enter the room. His body became tense. His heart beat quickly. He remembered the cup of water. He stood outside the door and listened. Then he went to his grandmother. "They are shouting. I hear them. What should I do?" "Sit with me." They sat outside. The argument continued. Arun felt guilty. He imagined the house breaking because he had not stopped it. His grandmother said, "Notice your breathing." "I cannot." "Then notice your feet." He pressed them against the ground. The earth was cool. "Now tell yourself what is true." Arun whispered, "They are angry." "What else?" "I did not begin it." "What else?" "I cannot control what they say." "What can you control?" "I can stay here." His grandmother nodded. The argument ended later, not because Arun entered, not because he cried. The adults became tired and stopped. The next day, his grandmother spoke to them. She told them their anger was frightening the child. At first, they defended themselves. Then they saw how quiet Arun had become. His father apologized. His mother held him. Arun wanted to say, "It is fine." That was his usual answer. Instead, he said, "I feel afraid when you shout." The room became silent. But this silence was different. It did not erase him. It allowed him to be seen. His parents did not change in one day. They still argued. But they began sending Arun outside before difficult discussions. They tried to lower their voices. Sometimes they failed. When they did, Arun practiced leaving the burden where it belonged. He began asking for things again. He told his mother he disliked one meal. He told his sisters when he wanted to play alone. He disagreed without apologizing immediately. Each small choice felt dangerous, but the family did not fall apart. He discovered that people could feel disappointed without stopping their love. One morning, his grandmother prepared a basket of food. "Take this to the judge," she said. The judge lived near the center of the village. He was respected for settling disagreements. But people said he could never admit when he was wrong. Arun lifted the basket. "Why are we giving him food?" "Because a person can know many laws and still be hungry for wisdom." Arun smiled. As he walked, he saw two men leaving the judge's house. One looked angry, the other looked defeated. Inside, the judge was explaining loudly why his decision had been perfect. He kept old records of every case he had won. He remembered every person who had praised him. He believed admitting one mistake would destroy his authority. Arun stood at the doorway with the basket. He had spent years believing peace depended on keeping everyone happy. The judge believed peace depended on proving himself right. Both were trying to control the room. Only one of them had begun to understand that real peace leaves space for truth. Arun entered the house. And so the next story began with a judge who could settle everyone's disputes except the argument inside himself. Arun entered the judge's house carrying the basket. He had learned that peace did not depend on keeping everyone happy. Now he was about to meet a man who believed peace depended on proving himself right. The judge sat behind a wide wooden table. Records were piled around him. Each record held the story of an argument, a debt, a broken promise, a stolen animal, a family dispute, a boundary between two homes. The judge had settled many difficult cases. People respected his memory. He remembered old laws. He could listen to a long argument and repeat every detail. He spoke with confidence. He rarely paused. He never said, "I do not know." At first, people admired this. They believed certainty was a sign of wisdom. The judge believed it too. He had spent many years building his authority. He feared that one doubtful answer would make everyone question him. So he answered quickly, even when the truth was unclear, even when both sides carried pain, even when more listening was needed. He believed a judge must always appear strong, and to him, strength meant never being wrong. Arun stood near the doorway. "My grandmother sent you food," he said. The judge looked at the basket. "Place it there." Arun did. Then he noticed two men standing before the table. One was a farmer, the other owned several goats. The farmer said the goats had entered his field and destroyed young plants. The goat owner said the fence had been weak. The judge listened for only a short time. Then he struck the table. "The farmer should have repaired his fence. The case is finished." The farmer said, "But the goats entered through the owner's open gate." The judge frowned. "You are questioning my decision?" "I am only asking you to listen." "I have listened." The farmer lowered his head. The goat owner smiled. Arun recognized the look on the farmer's face. It was the same look he had worn when adults told him that his feelings did not matter. The farmer was not only disappointed by the judgment, he felt unseen. The judge told both men to leave. Then he opened the basket. Inside were rice, vegetables, and a small clay cup. His grandmother had placed a folded note beside the food. The judge read it. "A full cup receives nothing." He frowned. He looked at Arun. "What does this mean?" Arun answered honestly. "I do not know." The judge almost corrected him. Then he stopped. The child had said the words without shame. "I do not know." The judge could not remember the last time he had said them. We recognize this fear. Many people do not fear being wrong because of the mistake itself. They fear what the mistake will mean. If I am wrong, perhaps I am weak. If I do not know, perhaps I am foolish. If I change my mind, perhaps people will stop respecting me. So we protect certainty. We speak louder. We interrupt. We refuse new facts. We defend old choices long after we understand they were harmful. The need to be right becomes more important than the truth. The judge opened the clay cup. It was empty. He filled it with tea. Then an old monk entered the house. The judge knew him. The monk sometimes visited people after difficult judgments. The judge had never liked this. He believed the monk softened people who needed discipline. "You came about the farmer," the judge said. "I came for tea." The judge pointed toward the cup. "Sit." The monk sat across from him. The judge began pouring. The cup filled. Still, he continued pouring. Tea ran over the edge. It spread across the table and touched the records. The judge quickly lifted the pot. "What are you doing?" The monk said. "I was waiting for you to notice." The cup was full. "Yes, you should have stopped me. Would you have listened?" The judge became annoyed. The monk pointed toward the note. "A full cup receives nothing." The judge wiped the table. "I understand the lesson." "Do you? You think I am proud? I think you are afraid." The judge looked at him. "Of what?" "Of the space where certainty ends." The judge leaned back. A judge cannot live in uncertainty. A wise judge must. "No, people come to me for answers. They come to you for justice. What is the difference? An answer can be quick. Justice may require patience." The judge looked toward the door where the farmer had stood. "I followed the law." "Did you follow the whole truth?" The fence was weak. "Was the gate open?" The judge did not answer. He had heard that detail, but it did not fit the judgment forming in his mind. Once he decided the farmer was careless, he stopped listening. This is how certainty blinds compassion. The mind chooses a story, then it protects it. Every new fact becomes an enemy. Every question becomes disrespect. The person before us is no longer a person. They become a problem to finish. The monk said, "When did you decide that doubt was weakness?" The judge looked away. As a young man, he had served under an older judge. That man often hesitated. He asked many questions. People mocked him. They said he was slow. One day, a powerful official demanded a quick judgment. The older judge refused. He said more evidence was needed. The official had him removed. The young judge watched all of this. He made a promise. He would never appear uncertain. He would speak quickly. He would become so confident that no one could push him aside. The promise helped him rise. Then it became a prison. He had confused authority with control. The monk said, "You are still protecting the young man who feared being dismissed." The judge's face tightened. Without authority, the law means nothing. Authority is useful. Then you agree with me. No, authority without humility becomes another form of blindness. The judge looked at the records. Each one ended with his signature. For years, he believed his signature closed the truth, but paper could not hold every grief. A law could measure debt. It could not always measure desperation. It could name punishment. It could not always reveal intention. Buddhist teaching values clear seeing. But clear seeing is not the same as pretending we know everything. Wisdom begins when the mind is willing to look again. The Buddha often taught people according to their conditions. The same words were not given to everyone. Why? Because human suffering is not simple. The same action can come from greed, fear, confusion, or need. Compassion does not erase responsibility. It helps us understand what responsibility should become. The judge said, "If I question every decision, I will never finish." The monk replied, "You do not need endless doubt. You need honest doubt." What does that mean? Enough space to ask whether you may be missing something. The judge looked at the child. Aaron had remained near the wall. The judge asked, "What did you think of my decision?" Aaron froze. He was used to giving answers that kept adults calm. His old habit returned. He wanted to say the judgment was wise. Then he remembered his grandmother. He said, "I thought the farmer looked like no one heard him." The judge felt discomfort. That does not mean the decision was wrong. "No," Aaron said, but he still looked unheard. The child had not attacked his authority. He had simply named what he saw. The judge sat quietly. For the first time in years, he reopened a case after declaring it finished. He called the farmer and the goat owner back. This time, he listened fully. The goat owner admitted that his gate had been left open. The fence had been weak. Both conditions mattered. The judge changed the decision. The goat owner would repair the damaged plants. The farmer would strengthen the fence. Neither man received everything he wanted, but both felt seen. When the case ended, the judge expected the villagers to think he was weak. Instead, the farmer bowed deeply. The goat owner also accepted the judgment. The judge discovered something. Correcting himself did not destroy his authority. It made his authority more trustworthy. But this was only the beginning. The next week, he found an old record involving a widow and her landlord. He remembered rushing the case. He found another involving a young man accused of theft. The evidence had been uncertain. The judge felt fear. If one decision had been incomplete, perhaps others were too. His mind wanted to defend everything. The monk said, "Do not turn humility into another punishment." What should I do? Review what can still be reviewed. Learn from what cannot. The judge began inviting another elder to sit during difficult cases. He asked more questions. He allowed silence. Sometimes he said, "I need time." At first, the words tasted like failure. Later, they felt like honesty. He learned that being right and doing right were not always the same. Being right protected his image. Doing right required him to remain open. One afternoon, a prison guard came to the judge's house. "There is a prisoner asking to see you," he said. The judge recognized the name. The man had been sentenced years earlier for stealing money from travelers. During the trial, the prisoner blamed everyone: his friends, his poverty, the guards, the judge. He had never accepted his part in what happened. Now he was refusing food and shouting that the locked door had ruined his life. The judge prepared to give a hard answer. Then he stopped. He remembered the full cup. "What does he want?" he asked. "To tell you that you destroyed him." The judge felt anger rise. The old certainty returned. The man broke the law. The sentence was fair. The case was closed. Then the judge heard the monk's voice in his mind. "Is there something you may be missing?" He walked toward the prison. Aaron watched him leave. The child had learned that he could not control every emotion in his family. The judge had learned that he could not control truth by speaking with certainty. Now he was going to meet a prisoner who believed freedom could begin only when everyone else accepted the blame. Behind the prison walls, another man was fighting against the consequences of his own choices. The judge walked toward the prison. He had learned that certainty could close the mind. Now he was going to meet a man who had closed his whole life around blame. The prisoner sat behind a locked door. He had been there for years. He hated the walls. He hated the guards. He hated the judge. He hated the people who had spoken against him. Each morning he woke angry. Each night he went to sleep angry. He believed the prison had stolen his life. Whenever someone asked what had happened, he told the same story. My friends betrayed me. The guards lied. The judge wanted to punish me. The world was against me. He never spoke about the travelers he had robbed. He never spoke about the fear he caused. He never spoke about the money he took. Those parts of the story remained outside his memory. Blame had become the only door he was willing to open. We recognize this. When consequences arrive, the mind looks for somewhere else to place them. It says, "They made me do it. I had no choice. If people had treated me better, I would not have acted that way." Sometimes there is truth in these words. People are shaped by poverty, fear, neglect, pressure, cruelty. No action appears from nothing. But understanding the conditions behind an action is not the same as refusing responsibility for it. The prisoner had suffered before he caused suffering. Both things were true. He had grown up poor. He had gone hungry. He had been beaten by an older relative. He had learned early that people with money were treated differently. His anger did not begin in the prison, but he had used that anger to excuse every choice that followed. The judge entered the narrow room outside the cell. The prisoner stood quickly. "You came at last." "I came. Have you come to release me?" "No." The prisoner laughed bitterly. "Then why are you here? To listen. You did not listen during the trial." The judge remembered how quickly he once made decisions. Perhaps not enough. The prisoner looked surprised. He had prepared himself for an argument. He wanted the judge to defend himself. He wanted someone to fight. Anger feels strongest when it has an enemy. The judge sat on a wooden stool. The prisoner remained standing. "You destroyed my life," he said. The judge answered, "I gave the sentence. You locked me here. The guards locked the door. You all worked together." "Yes." The prisoner struck the bars. "And you admit it." "I admit my part." The prisoner waited. Something was missing. The judge was not becoming angry. He was not denying anything. Blame had nowhere new to grow. The judge asked, "What was your part?" The prisoner turned away. "My part? Yes. You already decided that years ago. I am asking what you see now." The prisoner said nothing. The judge continued, "Did you take money from travelers?" "I was hungry. That was not my question. They were rich. That was not my question. No one cared whether I lived." "That may be true. Did you take the money?" The prisoner looked toward the wall. "Yes." "Did you threaten them?" "I had to frighten them." "Did you?" "Yes." "Then some part of this door was built by your actions." The prisoner stepped back. He hated the words because they touched something he had avoided for years. The walls were real. The locks were real. The sentence was real. But his anger had created another prison, one with no visible bars. Inside that prison, he could never change. Because if everything was someone else's fault, then nothing was in his hands. Blame protected him from shame. It also protected him from freedom. This is the hidden cost of refusing responsibility. At first, blame feels powerful. It gives us someone to hate. It gives pain a clear direction. But over time, it makes us helpless. If another person controls the cause of everything, then another person must also control the solution. We wait for them to apologize, to change, to release us, to admit they were wrong. Until then, We remain still. The prisoner said, "You want me to say I deserved this?" The judge shook his head. "I want you to see clearly. What is the difference? Deserving is a judgment. Responsibility is a fact." The prisoner looked at him. The judge continued, "You may believe the sentence was too long. It was. You may believe the trial was unfair. It was. Those questions can be examined, but even if every other person made mistakes, your actions remain yours." The prisoner gripped the bars. "What good does admitting that do now?" "It returns something to you." "What?" "Choice." The prisoner almost laughed. "I have no choice here. You have fewer choices, not none." The prisoner looked around the cell. The walls were close, the floor was hard, the door was locked. "What choice do I have? You can continue feeding anger. And the other choice? You can stop building another cell inside this one." The prisoner became quiet. The judge had come prepared to listen, but he did not know how to teach this part, so he asked the old monk to visit. The monk arrived the next morning. He brought no food, no advice, only a small bowl of water. He placed it outside the bars. Then he took a handful of dirt and dropped it in. The water became cloudy. The prisoner watched. "What are you doing?" The monk stirred the bowl, trying to make the water clear. "You are making it worse." The monk continued stirring. The prisoner became annoyed. "Stop touching it." The monk stopped. Slowly the dirt began to settle. The water became clearer. The monk said, "Your anger is like this." The prisoner frowned. "You think I should do nothing?" "No. I think you should stop stirring what has already happened." The prisoner looked at the bowl. "My anger is all I have." "No," the monk said. "It is what has covered everything else." "What else is there?" "Grief." The prisoner looked away. "Fear." He said nothing. "Shame." His face tightened. "Pain." The prisoner sat down. Anger had protected him from all of these. As long as he remained angry, he did not have to feel what he had become. He did not have to remember the face of the old traveler who begged him not to take the medicine money. He did not have to remember the child crying beside the road. He did not have to remember his own fear when the guards caught him. Anger gave him one simple story. They did this to me. Without that story, life became more difficult. He had to see what he had done to others. The monk said, "Responsibility is painful at first." The prisoner answered, "Then why choose it?" "Because pain that is faced can become wisdom. Pain that is blamed becomes poison." The prisoner looked at the locked door. "Will responsibility open that?" "Perhaps not today." "Then it changes nothing. It changes the person waiting behind it." The prisoner did not believe him, but the words stayed. That night he could not sleep. For the first time in years, he remembered the people he had harmed without immediately explaining why it was not his fault. The memories came slowly. One traveler had given him the money before he even raised the knife. The man's hands shook. Another had fallen while trying to run. The prisoner had laughed then. Now he felt shame. He wanted the anger back. Anger was easier. But once the truth had been seen, it could not become fully unseen. Buddhist teaching speaks about the mind as a place shaped by habits. Whatever we repeat becomes easier to repeat. Anger repeated becomes a path. Blame repeated becomes a path. Compassion repeated can also become a path. Responsibility repeated can become a path. Freedom of mind does not begin when all conditions become easy. It begins when we stop allowing old habits to choose every response. The next morning, the monk returned. The prisoner said, "I remembered them." "Who?" "The people." The monk waited. "I do not know what to do with that." "Begin by not turning away." The prisoner asked, Should I hate myself now? No. Why not? I did harm. Hating yourself is another way of keeping attention only on yourself. The prisoner looked confused. The monk continued. Remorse says, I caused suffering. How can I reduce suffering now? Self-hatred says, I am terrible, I am terrible, I am terrible. One looks outward, the other circles the self. The prisoner had never considered this. Even guilt could become another form of self-importance. The monk asked him to help in the prison kitchen. At first, the prisoner refused. He believed the work was beneath him. Then he agreed. He prepared bowls. He carried water. He served men he once insulted. One prisoner was old and could not walk well. The angry man began bringing food to his cell. No one praised him. No one shortened his sentence. But something inside him changed. He began to see that even inside a locked place, an action could still move toward harm or away from it. He could not control the walls. He could control whether he added more cruelty to the room. Months passed. The prisoner still felt anger. Some days he blamed the judge again. Some days he blamed the guards. But now he noticed the moment blame began. He asked, what part is theirs? Then, what part is mine? This did not make the world simple. It made it honest. The judge reviewed the case. He found that the original sentence had been harsher than necessary. The prisoner's time was reduced. When he heard the news, he felt joy. But the monk said, do not confuse the shorter sentence with the beginning of freedom. When did freedom begin? The first time you admitted what was yours. The prisoner understood. The lock had not opened that day, but something inside him had. One guard watched this change closely. He was known for being strict. He shouted often. He punished small mistakes. He believed prisoners respected only fear. But the truth was different. The guard was terrified of losing his position. He had a family to feed. He had little money saved. He feared becoming weak. He feared being replaced, so he controlled every prisoner harshly. Power became the wall he hid behind. One evening, the prisoner saw the guard checking an official notice again and again. His hands were shaking. What is wrong? The prisoner asked. Nothing. But something was wrong. A new officer was coming to review the prison. The guard believed one complaint could end his work. He had spent years making others afraid because he was afraid himself. The prisoner had blamed the locked door for everything. Now he saw a man standing outside the cell who was not free either. And so the next story began with a guard whose keys could open every door except the one built by his own fear. Caravan joined the caravan and watched its leader control every step. He had learned that power could not remove fear. Now he was traveling beside a man who believed a perfect plan could remove uncertainty. The caravan leader was named Sava. He was wealthy. He owned fine cloth, silver bowls, spices, oils, and stones brought from distant towns. He had led many journeys across dry land. People trusted his knowledge. He knew where wells were hidden. He knew which roads were safer. He knew how much food each person needed. He knew how long the animals could travel before resting. Planning had made him successful. But over time, planning became something more. It became his protection against fear. Sava did not only prepare for the journey, he tried to control it. Before leaving, he wrote every step on a long sheet of paper. The caravan would wake before sunrise. They would eat for exactly half an hour. They would leave before the first birds crossed the sky. They would stop at noon beside a certain rock. They would reach a well before dark. They would sleep there. The next day would follow another exact path. No one was allowed to change the plan. If one person delays us, Sava said, everyone suffers. At first, this sounded wise. A caravan needed order. People could die in the desert if they became careless. But Sava did not know the difference between wise order and frightened control. When an animal became tired, he became angry. When someone needed more water, he called them weak. When the wind changed, he looked offended. When clouds covered the stars, he blamed the guides. The road was expected to match the map. The people were expected to match the schedule. Life was expected to obey the paper in his hand. We recognize this. Plans are useful. They help us prepare. They help us use time well. They protect us from some avoidable mistakes. But a plan becomes a chain when we believe reality must follow it. We suffer not only because something changes. We suffer because we say, "This was not supposed to happen." The sentence creates another pain. The first pain belongs to the event. The second comes from our resistance. The caravan moved for several days without serious trouble. Sava became more confident. Each evening he checked the map. Everything had happened close to the time he had written. He began believing the journey was safe because he had planned it well. Dharan noticed this. He had once believed the prison remained safe only because people feared him. Sava believed the desert remained safe because it followed his schedule. On the fifth day, the wind began changing. At first, it was only a warm movement across the sand. Then, it grew stronger. One guide looked toward the horizon. "We should stop," he said. Sava checked the map. "We are not stopping here. A storm may be coming. The next shelter is 3 hours ahead. We may not reach it." Sava looked at the sky. There were no dark clouds, only dust rising in the distance. "We continue," the guide said. "The animals are becoming restless. They will settle. The wind is turning. The road does not change because of wind." The guide looked at Dharan. Dharan understood the danger of arguing with a frightened man who called fear confidence. He said, "Sava, the guide knows this land. I also know this land. No one is questioning that. Then keep moving." The caravan continued. The wind grew louder. Sand struck their faces. The animals lowered their heads. The distant road disappeared. Sava kept checking the map, but the map could not show what the wind was doing now. Soon, the sky became brown. People could barely see one another. Someone shouted. A rope broke. One cart turned sideways. An animal escaped into the dust. The storm arrived with such force that everyone dropped to the ground. Sava screamed for them to remain in line. No one could hear him. He shouted at the guides. He shouted at the animals. He shouted at the wind. The storm did not listen. The plan disappeared beneath the sand. For hours, the caravan remained close together, holding ropes between them. Dharan helped tie people to the carts so no one would be lost. The guides covered the animals' eyes. Everyone waited. Sava continued speaking, as if commands could make the storm end. "Secure the goods. Move the third cart. Find the road." But there was no road to find. Only wind, only sand, only the next breath. At last, Dharan grabbed Sava's arm. "Stop shouting. We are losing everything. We are losing strength. My plan. Your plan cannot help us now." Sava looked at him with anger. "The plan was correct. The conditions changed. No, the guide failed. The guide warned you. The storm came early. The storm does not know your schedule." The words reached Sava like an insult. He pulled away. "This journey was supposed to be safe," Dharan said. "No journey can promise that." The sandstorm continued until night. When the wind weakened, the caravan was scattered. One cart had overturned. Some goods were buried. 2 animals were missing. The road had vanished beneath new dunes. No one had died. But Sava looked at the damage as if the world had betrayed him. He sat beside the torn map. This should not have happened. A monk who had been traveling with the caravan quietly walked toward him. He had spoken little during the journey. Sava had barely noticed him. The monk sat on the sand. Sava said, "Do not give me teachings now. I was going to ask you a question." "What question?" "Was the map useful before the storm?" "Yes." "Was it useful during the storm?" "No." "Then did the map fail, or did its use end?" Sava looked at him. "It was supposed to guide us. It guided you while the conditions matched it. So I should not plan." The monk shook his head. "This is how the frightened mind hears wisdom. It turns every lesson into an extreme. What do you mean? You think there are only two choices: control everything or prepare for nothing. Sava did not answer. The monk picked up part of the torn map. A plan is a tool. I know. Do you? Sava frowned. The monk continued. A tool serves the moment. You tried to make the moment serve the tool. The words made Sava quiet. Buddhist teaching speaks about attachment. Attachment does not mean we must own nothing. It means we stop demanding that what we hold must obey our need for safety. A plan becomes attachment when we cannot release it after conditions change. A role becomes attachment when we believe we are nothing without it. A relationship becomes attachment when love turns into possession. An idea becomes attachment when truth matters less than defending it. Sava had not only carried a map, he had trusted it more than the living signs around him. The wind, the animals, the guide, the changing sky. His plan had become more real to him than reality. The monk said, "When the guide warned you, what did you feel?" "Annoyed." What was beneath the annoyance? Sava looked away. Fear. What did you fear? That we would fall behind. And if you fell behind, we might lose money. And if you lost money, people would say I had failed. Now the truth appeared. The storm had not only threatened the goods, it had threatened the identity Sava had built. He was the man who always arrived on time, the man whose caravans never failed, the man who controlled every risk. The plan protected more than the journey. It protected his reputation. The monk said, "You did not continue because the road was safe." Sava looked down. "You continued because stopping felt like weakness." Sava remembered the guide's warning. He had known the wind was becoming dangerous, but turning back would mean admitting uncertainty. He had chosen pride over conditions. Planning was not the problem. Attachment to the image of being a perfect leader was. Sava said, "People trusted me." Yes. "I led them into danger." Yes. The monk did not soften the truth. Sava expected comfort. Instead, he received responsibility. "What should I do now?" he asked. "Begin with what is real." Sava looked around. "One cart is damaged." "Yes." "2 animals are missing." "Yes." "Some water was lost." "Yes." "The road is gone. For now." The monk pointed toward the people. "What else is true?" Sava looked. "No one died." "What else?" "The remaining animals are alive." "What else?" "We still have food." "What else?" "The guides know how to read the stars when the sky clears." The monk nodded. "Now you are leading." Sava understood. Before the storm, he had not truly been leading. He had been forcing. Leadership did not mean making every condition obey. It meant seeing conditions clearly and responding. The next morning, Sava gathered everyone. He did something they had never heard him do. He apologized. "I ignored a warning," he said. "I followed the plan after it stopped being useful." The guide watched him carefully. Sava continued, "We will not move until we understand the new land." No one called him weak. The people looked relieved. The guides climbed a high dune. They searched for signs of the old road. Dharan organized the remaining goods. Others repaired the cart. Sava listened. He still made decisions, but he stopped pretending he alone could see everything. This is the middle way. We prepare, then we remain open. We choose a direction, then we adjust. We do not worship our first idea. A wise mind is not a mind that never changes. It is a mind that changes when reality asks it to. By evening, the sky cleared. The stars appeared. The guides found a safer direction. The caravan began moving slowly. They no longer followed the original schedule. They rested when the animals needed rest. They shared water carefully. Sava felt discomfort each time the plan changed, but he practiced releasing it. He said, "This is what we know now." The words replaced, "This is what must happen." Several days later, they saw a small temple between the hills. Its stone walls had been partly covered by sand. A bell hung near the entrance. The caravan stopped there for water and shelter. Inside the courtyard, they found a young novice sitting beneath the burning sun. His face was pale. His body was thin. He had been meditating without food or proper sleep. An older monk begged him to rest. The novice refused. "I will not move until I become enlightened," he said. Sava looked at the young man. He recognized the same tightness he had carried around his map. The novice had turned the spiritual path into another plan. He believed awakening could be forced if he pushed hard enough. The caravan leader had tried to command the journey. Now they had found a novice trying to command his own mind. And so we have come to the end of the story. If this story spoke to you, write "I release the plan" in the comments. Subscribe for the next Buddhist story, where a young novice learns that even enlightenment cannot be forced.